Afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Putnam County Board of County Commissioners Workshop for 2 p.m. Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. I'd like to welcome everybody here this afternoon. We'll begin with the invocation, and Commissioner Harvey will lead us in the pledge. Everybody please stand. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this glorious day and all the blessings in it, Father God. Just thank you for the opportunity to gather as commissioners and staff and citizens, Father God. Just let us use the information given to us to make the best decisions for all the citizens of Putnam County. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Harvey. Our first item of business is public comment on agenda items. Any individuals wishing to make public comment on agenda items only? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the Port Authority workshop. So I'll recess the Board of County Commissioners workshop and move into the We'll recess until 2:05. I'm moving forward too fast. Y'all can leave now. Thank you for keeping me straight. County Commissioners workshop to recess it and convene the Port Authority meeting. Okay. Item A, public comment on any Port Authority items. Okay, seeing none, general discussion on any Port Authority items. Commissioners?
Yeah, I got some stuff.
Okay, Commissioner Adams-Ack?
Yeah, so I guess I've spent some time specific to the port location itself, driving out there, looking around, kind of walk where the rail goes a little bit, I'm trying to visualize what our end picture is, I guess is the best way to put it. And I guess I'm just trying this goes back to, I think we need it, whether it's someone that we hire or someone that we do as a takeoff, we need someone to assess, like even where that rail turns into where we cross the road, right? Then there's that building straight across the street, and I don't know if that's like an electrical building or whatever, and then there's the pipe for GP that comes underneath there. If we unload crates of stuff at the dock there, how do we get it to this location we're buying, other things? I mean, we're not gonna truck it, we're not gonna hand carry it, so to have a rail come off to there and then have a rail go to that property across the street, but I think there's also one piece of property between us and that as well, so I think we probably need to start talking with Veritas, because I think we're probably gonna need to use some of their property to get to our property whenever we decide to develop that, where we can get a rail car. Let's say we unload a bunch of things, we put it on the rail car, and we want to ship it across the street. I didn't really visualize anywhere where we can get over there, or if, obviously, that property, I don't know who owns that property between us. Is that Mr. Williams? I think used to. There's a property in between where the rail is and the property we're purchasing. So I'd like for us to start developing that end picture as well. What that entails, I'm not sure, but I just can't seem to put it together in my head when I look at it from the street or from the overhead view.
Okay, Commissioner, did you have a comment?
I did. You know, we hired a guy this morning,
Yeah,
and I'd like to, before we move forward, that's part of what he's supposed to develop, is just the kind of things that you're saying. So I'd kind of like to see what he does before we try to preempt what he's doing by coming up with a plan that's outside of what we hired somebody to do this morning.
so
That's the only comment.
is that part of what he's hired? And I apologize, I was in transit here this morning when you guys talked to him.
Yeah, that's part of
And
what.
I had met him before, so I was actually kind of like, I was hoping that I got here in time to hear what he had to say. So what did we hire him to do exactly?
To come up with a conceptual plan on on some of these kind of items. I mean, it's not gonna be a full boat plan. It's mainly gonna be to develop it to the point to where we can request the money from the PID fund, I think is what he called it. So it's gonna be, there has to be at least enough visionary in it to where it will get us to the application process. So I'd like to see what happens with that before we go and try to preempt that, what we just hired somebody to do this morning. So that shouldn't be too long. Do we have a time frame on that?
The grant application deadline is May 16th, so we'll start getting some information.
So within the next couple of months, we should have some information.
Yes, sir. So they'll be working on the technical specs of the grant application for submittal by May 16th.
So part of that is tech specs, how we're gonna transport stuff to the property across the street. So that's more what I'm talking about, is we're gonna get through this thing, we're gonna dredge some water, we're gonna dredge some stuff out of there, and then we're gonna start a plan. Well, you know what, the day you dredge, that starts filling back in. So how long does that dredging last? I understand that's probably part of the dredging study, but, you know, I was told early on that that's probably 4 to 5 years, we'll need another little scrape off. You know, do we get to the point where we dredge it and then we're finally putting something in place when we need to dredge it again? That's what I'm fearful of.
Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Adams, I share some of the same concerns, but I also share the excitement of one day when we get this PID study in, then we can look at what we're going to do. Right now, we're crawling before we walk, and we're going to walk before we run. So I really believe that buying that anchor piece of property across the street is going to really solidify our port. I do think you're right that talks with Veritas should be, because it just from the naked eye, it looks like maybe if they moved a little north and we had some property, we might could do more. But I'm really excited to see what the consultant will do after this study's done and everything. We're going to have to find somebody that's going to tell us what we're going to look like when we grow up. And I do believe that property becomes valuable to us, that anchor piece that we're trying to buy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Rawls?
I think at some point we do need to sit down as the Port Authority ourselves. You know, the consultant we hired is hired to look at applying for a grant to do a feasibility study for dredging of the port. But I do think that we should sit down as the Port Authority, bring in professionals that we can work with. The first thing we need to do is hire a full-time Port Authority manager, if that's the direction that we're gonna be going in, is operating as a port. But not just the property, you know, I've got genuine concerns about how you're gonna get traffic onto 17 out of there. You know, we may have to cut a piece of a road through that property we're purchasing right now to be able to make it accessible. And to Commissioner Adams' point, if we tore the buildings down out there, we might have enough room to stockpile a few containers here and there, but there's not gonna be a lot of room to put containers and then turn them around. So, you know, I don't know if we're putting the chicken before the cart before the horse. You know, but I think at some point, I've been asking this for 3 years, we need to look at getting a Port Authority manager that can take us, what if we get turned down for the dredging grant? Are we just gonna stop dead in our tracks? Or maybe somebody else can come in. This morning, they mentioned the airport. I keep hearing about the Port Authority project, and I don't know what the Port Authority project is because I've not been involved in any discussion that has to do with anything except dredging the port at this point. So I think maybe we should sit down and have a strategic planning session regarding just the port, but bring someone in to manage this as well, if that's the direction we're gonna head. Thank you.
And I think we had talked about this a number of times, and Julianne, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't somebody getting together the properties that the port owns
Yes,
as
sir.
a whole, not just out there?
Yes,
So
sir,
we-
we're
that we
working
can
on
have that
bringing you back
information.
a special port workshop and the impacts of what it would be to look at those properties and the overall scheme of the port, yes.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Rawls
So
again?
generally speaking, we own 130 Ori Griffin, which is the sheriff's department. We own the property on Carter Road, which is the Triangle Park. We've got the business park. We've got a small piece across the street from the business park on 309C, and then we have another small 10 acres that's across the street on St. John's Avenue. And if I'm going from memory, there's a couple other small other pieces that are dotted around, but nothing that would have any value as far as any kind of economic development because they're very small. But the only thing that we have that we could horse trade with would be the business park, Triangle Park, and the sheriff's department. Otherwise, and what we have, the 10 acres we have out there at the barge port currently, not include the 15 that we're looking to take on. But, you know, like I said, this morning, he tossed out the airport. So I don't know if there's a conversation that's taking place outside of the commission that has to do with looking at a holistic approach. But I personally would like to be involved in these conversations. I think they need to take place in this meeting room, and we need to inform the public and also inform the commissioners of what we may be looking at doing. If there's an opportunity for us to partner up with the city regarding the airport, that's great. I just would like to be involved in that conversation at some point.
Commissioner Adams Act?
Yeah, and there is some lands too, and 3 of the 5 of us are on the Development Authority, I can't remember the name of that, the Putnam County Development Authority. And there is some land, I think, from sitting in one of y'all's meetings, on the end of Veritas towards Rice Creek, I think it is there. And then there's some between us, between the port. And obviously, that's a standalone entity, but I think that has to come into play, though, in the overall conversation whenever we do decide to cross this bridge on what are the uses of that. I know a lot of that's wetland from listening to you guys' discussion on that. And then, you know, potential mitigation either to benefit us or to benefit Veritas or any other business that may be able to utilize that land. And I think there's one other piece that's back towards the restaurant there, I think, isn't there, on the other side of the street? There's a smaller piece, I think like 2 of the Development Authority, when you guys had that picture of the lands. Yeah, I think they're back in there somewhere. And it sounded like that piece was pretty useless.
Outside the airport, west of the airport.
Yeah, and it sounded like that was pretty much a swamp, that one.
He's an EDA, not Port Authority.
Yeah. Economic development, it's 20 acres in there and that.
And then the only other thing I had is, we did talk about getting a conversation about using the spur, the rail spur, and whether we wanted to charge a fee for accessing it, things like that. I know we took it off this agenda just because this one's a little bit full, but I do want to make sure that that is going to become on another agenda coming up, I guess, Administrator Suggs? And
If that's the will of the board, we'll certainly add it to a future workshop, absolutely. Because we did talk about that. And it's not on here today because we're waiting on some other information based on the request that you had made about the properties. And and moving some stuff from Port Authority General Fund. So we're trying to put all that together for so we can have a holistic meeting on the entire subject of the port.
Yeah, I think that one could be done as a separate from the overall Port Authority, because that's very specific to the rail spur and its property. So if we can get that added to an upcoming, if the other commissioners agree, I guess, or if not, under commissioner request, to an upcoming workshop, I'd appreciate it.
We'll get it added to the upcoming workshop.
Thank you.
All right,
That's all I have with Port Authority.
The only thing I request is that if we're gonna talk about the rail spur, that we let Veritas know where they can be in attendance at that workshop.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. Any other discussion on Port Authority? Okay, seeing none, we'll adjourn to Port Authority and reconvene the Board of County Commissioners workshop. Move down to the workshop agenda, and 4, item A, administrative budget development, personnel budget discussion. Ms. Julianne?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. We, I guess officially will kick off our fiscal year 23 budget development with the first item for topic, which is how we're going to approach our personnel model going into the next year. As you all know, we're competing with a few factors that will come into play as we talk. I've broken this into a couple of different parts so that maybe it's more easily to chew off and chew. If we talk about part A for a moment, as we unofficially reconcile fiscal year 21's fire rescue personnel budgets, what we found was that in order to maintain the minimum staffing levels to provide current service to our constituents, we incurred approximately $950,000 of unbudgeted overtime. This occurs when we have overtime as a result of absences that are not within our regularly scheduled overtime factors. So this would be FMLA, military deployment, injuries, illnesses, anything that takes us above and beyond what we are able to project on a rational basis at the beginning of the year. From a budget standpoint, really there are 2 options available as we walk into fiscal year 23's development. We can add those dollars to your current personnel scenario and assume that we're going to be at or above that with our current staffing levels. So the more, obviously, the more you use an engine, the more components break, so the more outages we may have, the more dollars we may spend on unbudgeted overtime, but it at least will give us a rational projection. Option 2 is to add 9 additional staff members, which is essentially less than, just under the 950, which we were over this year, which creates the reduction in the unscheduled, because at that point we have a factor in there to cover those absences for which we know historically we're going to experience. As we discuss this with the management staff, the staff recommendation is option 2, adding the 9 additional staff members. It is a lesser impact to the budget than what we were out during those fiscal year 21 days, and it has the ability to give our current employees a higher quality of life, i.e. They know there's respite for them when they need to take that time off without having to lean on another person to work an additional shift. So that scenario is below for you. As we look at those 2 scenarios, if you'll look at column 2, that's if we just add a flat 950 into your current personnel scenario, you're at a total sum of 9.975, versus if you add 9 additional positions, the cost of benefits and everything else, you're at a total of 9.77.
Okay.
If I can get some feedback from the commission on that particular item.
Okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, a few years ago, we sat in this room and we saw, not only heard, our fire personnel, rescue personnel begging for help. They were wore out, tired, and just didn't see if they could continue on at the pace they were continuing on at. So I think, in my opinion, hiring the 9 additional staff seems like that's the best idea for me. It appears to me at first glance that it will help the overtime budget, and it also might give Chief Hutchinson and Public Safety Director Grimes the ability to work on other things with more personnel. Now, it's just me, I don't know much more about it, but you know, we sit here and talk ISO ratings, and we're looking at trying to help out with fire departments and getting those documents done, maybe that would free up some people that could help do some of that work. So it makes sense to me. Option two, I mean, I don't like overtime that much. I know it's needed sometimes, but I think having the additional manpower does give our current employees a better quality of life. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Commissioner Adamczak?
So I guess my comments would be twofold. I mean, given the two scenarios, I think the one where we add the additional staff for basically the same cost makes absolute sense, because that allows you not only to take some of the overtime and spread it out across multiple people at a lower pay rate, obviously, but it also allows the opportunity for more flexibility for someone taking time off, all that stuff that's explained here. The flip side of that is, I'm assuming in our budget last year into this year, we accommodated for some overtime based on, I mean, I assume we don't go, hey, we're not gonna have any overtime this year, when every year before this year we had overtime. So did we exceed the amount that we set aside or budgeted for overtime? And if so, how did we get to $950,000 before we waved a red flag saying, hey, we need to do something about this?
So you have multiple questions in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Every budget personnel scenario in the fire rescue sides accounts for a projected, what we can reasonably expect person A to work in overtime. So those hours are built in for every single employee. What happens is I can't predict the future, so I have no idea how many I'm gonna lose on FMLA. And I have no backup for that person who I lost on FMLA. In years prior, before fiscal year 21, we had so much attrition in the budget, so many vacant positions that we weren't able to ever fully staff, that you always had the ability to compensate for those overtime dollars. Fiscal year 21 was the first year where we saw our fire rescue department achieve a full staffing level, meaning the vacancies that I have in the budgeted personnel model were routinely full. Now, I'm not telling you there was never any turnover, or there was never a time where there was a hiring or a firing, but even with that turnover, we consistently stayed full. In that metric, what you saw then is the impact of what happens when we have a military deployment and we still have to staff the vehicle or the position that that person was in. To speak to the question of how your personnel models get there, we are a governmental entity who does accounting on a fund basis, and so provided that your fund balances are within realm, they're not a net negative, you continue to operate as you are required to operate. The board always knew there would be and is unbudgeted overtime. And so it's not until we close those books in that fiscal year that I'm able to tell you exactly what your unbudgeted overtime looked like and the impacts that it had on personnel, on FICA, on FRS, and all of those factors that are determined.
So there's no red herring out there that would tell us that we're getting to like 250, 300,000 this year, where we can say, hey, we need to start getting proactive and do something about this sooner in the cycle. I'm just trying to move this up sooner in the cycle, right? Could we have, maybe if we realized this 6 months ago, got 3 people? Maybe it's hard for me to understand the idea that you have to wait till you're in the hole $950,000 unexpectedly before you can even observe it. That doesn't seem right.
We continued every year to make adjustments in the personnel model to account for more unbudgeted. But again, those are guesses based on historic. What you are going to see, though, Commissioner Adamczak, speaking to your point, is so as we go through the quarterly budget reviews, which you're going to see in the next, you'll see it at your next meeting, you will have the opportunity to see where the end of the fire fund is, and you'll see a category for personnel expenses. The good and the bad to this is that, let's say in Q3 of this year, we're running in a deficit in the fire personnel model. The problem is, it won't be until we reconcile this year's books that I can tell you exactly where we're gonna be, and that won't be until April of next year. And so the changes that you impact essentially take 18 months to 2 years to see whether or not you're gonna come out where you believe you are. And that's why we project the personnel models, as we've done in this scenario, based on the dollars we reconciled against the dollars we project if we add the personnel.
That's good for now.
Okay. Commissioner Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think part of I'm also for number 2. I went through the different scenarios. I had a meeting yesterday with Director Grimes and with Miss Young, and I went through different scenarios. What would we do if we hired 6? Because this is not going to completely stop mandatory overtime. It's just, regular overtime. It's just not. There's no way you can stop it. Somebody might be in the middle of a shift and it's time for them to knock off. Well, they can't just get out and call somebody else. They got to finish whatever they're doing if it's an emergency situation. So it's not going to stop it. So I went through the scenarios with 3 people and 6 people, and was told by Director Grimes that it needed to be done in 3s, or what they're going to use these people for won't work out. And so, and you would think along those same lines that people would want all this overtime, but I'm here to tell you that in today's world, young people aren't as interested in overtime as we were when we were their age. I'm just telling you, they're not. Their quality of life means as much or more than the money does to them in this world that they're in. And so I don't know what percentage, but a large percentage of this $950,000 wasn't us going and saying, hey, you guys want overtime? No, it was saying, you're working this weekend, you have no choice. That is not a good environment for them to be in. And that's the reason I think I'm for option 2 more than anything else, is the quality of life that we need to let the people that work for us have means as much as anything. Also, what I haven't heard here yet today that I think needs to be brought up is we have a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with the union that basically says that we'll do certain things, and we have not been upholding our end of that MOU. It's my understanding, if I understood right yesterday. So that means that without doing this, we're not upholding our part of the MOU that we have with the union. So I don't see where we've got a choice here, guys. And nobody in this room or anybody else in this county hates growing government worse than this commissioner right here does. But in some instances, you don't have a choice. The amount of work, the different things that have come about that we can't project, like if somebody's on deployment or if they're on certain things that we just, are you gonna tell me that you're gonna take somebody on military deployment and take their job away from them? You ain't gonna make me do that either. I'm telling you right now, that's not right. So we need to support those people that are out there doing that, not make them come home and not have a job. So I don't see where we've got an option here other than to do option 2, go ahead and give them the 9. And like I said, I tried everything yesterday with Director Grimes, and what about 6? Could you get by with 6? How about 7? How about 3? No. And he went through the process of this is why we picked 9. It wasn't just a willy-nilly number that we just picked out of the sky. He went through the program where we need 3, we need them in the shifts of 3. 6 might do it, but we won't know, and we're gonna have more mandatory overtime if we do that. So I just don't see where we got a point, I just don't see where we got an option here other than to let them have these 9 people that they need. Hopefully they can fill those positions. That's my biggest fear, is we give them the 9 and we can't fill the positions because we've ran into that in other areas of the county. And so, I'm hoping that's not the case here, but I'm for option 2 also after all that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Rawls?
All right, I'm not familiar, when you say MOU, are you referring to the collective bargaining agreement, or is there a separate MOU that I'm gonna?
Come up here and talk to him, JR, please. You can explain it better than I can.
All right, while he's coming up, there's other work centers that deserve the same consideration that we're giving the fire and EMS. You know, I think the only reason we're having the conversation about fire and EMS is we absolutely need to provide fire and rescue services. But I think it goes without saying that we have cut services in other departments by not having this conversation about their departments, whether it's staffing, equipment, overtime, and all that. But what MOU is he referring to?
So we entered an MOU with the union that basically would guarantee them, we would staff up to 5 positions a day off, so that in the agreement itself right now, it basically, if you'll cover a shift, as long as you get coverage for it, they'd allow them off. So we were going to limit it to the amount of people that could take off as 5 people with a guarantee of 2, that we guarantee 2 people of overtime. But the problem is with our staffing, we haven't been able to get the guaranteed 2 to allow them off without doing mandatory overtimes.
You're gonna have to restate that in layman's terms, but are you talking about, we have a minimum staffing policy that we entered into an agreement with outside of the collective bargaining agreement?
No, the current agreement said that we would, as long as there was a position vacant and they got coverage, they'd allow it off, which could mean 8 people a day. So
Well, do we have a minimum staffing policy in writing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why would we enter into any kind of an agreement then? The bargaining unit agrees to work under the conditions that we have with our staffing. So if, unless there's language in their contract that allows them to participate in the minimum staffing, why would we do this? Is there a benefit to the taxpayers? Because
Yeah, we were trying to, so with setting a maximum amount of people off per shift. So if 8 people wanted off and 8 people covered it, we were trying to get to a point where we said, listen, the most we can get off, because if you replace position for the taxpayer, you're paying a replacement of overtime every single day, as long as people would sign up and work that time.
I think the reason I'm concerned is,
Okay.
so now I'm going to speak on behalf of the bargaining unit, and I'm not a member, but I'm thinking from where they're thinking. They shouldn't be responsible for any staffing. They should not have an understanding that says that their people will agree to work or not work. I think that's not playing fair. So is this in writing? There's an MOU in writing between the collective bargaining unit and the county?
Yeah, they voted it in,
They voted as part of their collective bargaining agreement.
the MOU.
Is it
Agreement
part of their
opens.
agreement?
It's part of the agreement contingent upon when the contract gets opened again in September.
So if I ask you a yes or no question, does their collective bargaining agreement have this language in it currently?
It's MOU outside the contract.
Okay. I would just say, me personally, I would never work under those circumstances if I worked for the fire department. I think that the county we need to get our act together. So they can work and not have to worry about, the concern that I have is that we're asking the employees to now share in part of the responsibility and participate in something that we're supposed to be providing. It's not their
This is
responsibility.
just setting a maximum allowable off per day to project your minimum staffing. It's
You
not-
can do that without an MOU. You're allowed that under management rights anyways. That's what I'm saying. I would hate to hear it in the
I
future.
didn't mean to start a debate.
No, it's not. I'm
Involving
just saying,
The head director of.
I would hate to hear in the future that somebody comes in here and says, well, the bargaining unit's not upholding their end of the deal. Because I personally don't think that should be in the collective bargaining agreement. I think that's a management right, it's a management responsibility, nothing to do with the collective bargaining agreement. So anyways, attrition, just a real quick count, and I'm looking at the pay center for EMS, not fire. You had, just did a quick count, about 30 people out of roughly 80-something people that quit in a 12-month period of time. How do you address that? And we'll go ahead and address that. How do you answer that question? How do you address that to stop that bleed? Because that's causing some of what I'm seeing here.
Well, I mean, a lot of the people we hired are not, I mean, they go back home to go to work. I mean, because
Hold on, what?
they go back home to work. They go back to St. Johns County. They go back to Jacksonville, because that's where we're able to hire from. When we go over to do a recruitment session that,
You're saying they resigned to go to where they, okay, I
yes,
got
sir,
it.
where they reside,
Okay.
honestly. So we're working on that now, trying to put a program in our schools to get them out, getting our high school students into the fire and rescue academies, whether it be at St. Augustine Votech or over at the fire college, recruiting our own local students, because then they can basically stay home and work our local jobs.
So I looked at one position and I just crunched numbers real quick. Paramedic, $13 an hour. You're about $20 an hour in overtime. Typically, they work 156 budgeted hours of overtime a year, correct? 24 and 48. they're gonna be working on a 53-hour work week with 3 hours of overtime for a total of 56. So that's 3,200 rounding up in round numbers. But in this case, they had $20,200 in overtime, which means they were $17,000 more. And if I divide that 17,000 by 20, I'm gonna come up with a large number of hours of overtime. And this person quit. And when I talk to some of these folks, the pay is secondary to the burnout, to be honest with you. That is the chief complaint that I hear.
Absolutely.
So I understand that you're looking to create 9 more positions, but my question is, if I go back to January of 2021 and I gave you those 9 positions, I'm still looking at the exact same conversation 1 year later, because you've got a large amount of attrition. And it's not, and you just said they're going home, they want to go to Jacksonville work, they want to go to St. Augustine, they want to go to Ocala. So I don't know that giving you 9 new positions, I'm in favor of it, by the way. I just don't think I think that it's going to fly in the face of every other employee in the county, because y'all going to get the positions, you're going to get the funding. It's not going to help the problem, and it's not going to fix the problems that we have in public works, getting our roads and ditches and culverts fixed. That's just where I'm coming from. How many active military reserves do you have right now?
I think 4.
4, okay. So, and just in my estimation, that's a drop in the bucket. That really doesn't end the conversation. So that's not creating heartache
It
for
really
you.
hurts when they're gone a year at a time.
Right, but you're only losing 4. You lost around 30 people in that same year that resigned. So I don't think that 4 really affects it as much as the folks that are quitting and going to work somewhere else. And then you've got what does it cost you to take a new paramedic and put them on the street in real dollars?
Time you buy them gear and everything and train them.
Training them, how long does that take? They've got to buy another paramedic.
Right, they got probably 6 months of riding with another paramedic, and then they do different phases, 3 months with another paramedic, 3 months with an EMT. They get signed off by the medical director, so I mean, you're 6 months,
A lot of money.
a lot of money.
And then they quit and go to work somewhere else. I think that's the solution that we've got to come up with. And I don't know that hiring 9 more people is going to fix that problem.
Okay, Commissioner Adams, aye?
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know much about MOUs or any of that part of it, so I'm not even going to pretend like I can speak to it. As far as, again, I think we need to figure out a way to have a red flag come up a little sooner than being in the whole $950,000 as far as overtime. There's got to be a way, like you said, the 4 people that you knew they were going to go away for a year, at that point, you know that you have that hole for those hours for the year. So at that point is where I'd like to see the conversation happen. The attrition for someone leaving to go home, the way we do it is, and I agree with that wholeheartedly, train the people locally, try to hire local people, be more competitive with the wages, which I think we're getting there, we're getting closer. I just really think we need to have some sort of means to flag the situation before we're this far down. I mean, that's 10%, the way I look at it, of your total budget for payroll. It's a big number. So I guess if there's no way to do it, I guess there's no way to do it. I don't believe it, but there's got to be a way to do it before once a year.
Okay,
Okay.
so what do we need to actually do
Exactly.
to make this move forward?
Motion or just waive and support?
A motion.
I move that we use option number 2 to let them hire, the budget for hiring 9 more personnel. in this
Second that.
department.
We got a proper motion on the floor by Commissioner Turner to go with option 2, to hire 9 more positions, and a proper second by Commissioner Harvey. We'll open it up for discussion. Commissioner Rawls?
What's the total impact on the budget again? What was the millage?
It's on your paperwork, 971.
I know, I closed it out by accident and I left my other book in my
I'll
truck.
help you out, 971.
971.
Okay, any further discussion?
I guess one question I would have is, I'm good.
Okay, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Item A passes. Move down to item B, administration fiscal year 23 budget development funding of constitutional officers.
No, sir. I've got Part B of, I put a lot in that first item, so if I can
Oh,
get
yes,
you to
you
go
did.
back up to
I'm
A for
sorry.
me, sir.
You correct?
I
Julianne?
just kept coming up with more information I felt like I needed to tell you or share with you.
Okay.
So if we can now take a look at Part B, as administration begins the budget development, one of the first things that we need to determine is personnel scenarios countywide. What needs to be considered in that is that the state of Florida has just finalized its legislative session where they've announced that state employees effective July 1 will be paid a minimum of $15 an hour, or for those above the minimum will receive a 5.38 cost of living adjustments, with the caveat that additionally, certain categories of state employees have been identified to receive substantially higher wage adjustments. Your public safety sectors, your educational professionals, some of those sectors that the state government picked out to give additional incentive to. The legislature also provided dedicated reoccurring funding for salary increases for deputy sheriffs and correctional officers employed by the sheriff's offices in fiscally constrained counties. Specifically, Putnam County, under this initiative, has been appropriated $1.25 million of reoccurring dollars pending the governor's signature on the budget appropriations bill. We are hopeful that if we can establish our desired scenario today, that the constitutional officers will follow suit and that we can all be relatively equal as we enter fiscal year 23 to try to remain competitive amongst each other. With that consideration, we put a table together that shows the amount of staffed positions making in those categories of your minimum wage, which the state has identified. So you'll start there at the bottom of the table, less than 11. This is your 10 to 11s, 11 to 12, 12 to 13, 13 to 14, 14 to 15. And it's broken down by each of your constitutional offices. As you can see, the constitutional officers have done a great job of bringing those wages up above the minimum, and the board is still trailing, and that is what this year's scenario attempts to correct. So the executive management team has sat down and run 100 different scenarios, but we've brought to you today 5 different. With that, we are, as a team, recommending the scenario that allows for a $13 minimum wage floor and a 5.38% COLA for the remaining staff. That's going to provide a 30% wage adjustment for our lowest paid employees and then reduce the percentage of wage adjustment down to a minimum of 5.38 countywide. This is part of our short-term and long-term goal, as we've discussed. Short-term, it raises us above where we have to be for the state's minimum. We're still going to be below what the state's paying and below what our other constitutionals are paying at our floor. However, then our goal would be to organically move the workforce over the next few years so that we can attempt to also mitigate the impacts of compaction. So that scenario is there, and it's broken down by fund, what it looks like as far as the impacts. And I'm asking for board direction so that we can move forward with our desired scenario as we build the budget this year.
Okay, questions, Commissioner Rawls?
When I discussed this with the staff, I would express my frustration and concern that it's not enough. When you start compounding what we're calling a cost of living adjustment, what we're really doing is we're solidifying the fact that over half of our employees will fall into poverty, will not be able to afford to buy housing, vehicles. You know, everything right now is just so out of touch for a lot of people. But I think we need to look at going to the $15 an hour sooner than later. It needs to be not only at 15, but think about the person that's currently making $13.55 an hour and they're going to get a 5% pay raise. It just, to me, seems like this is going to be a slap in the face of our employees. They would be better off going to work for the state of Florida immediately because they can make $2 an hour more at a minimum wage. I think we're running the risk of running our folks off and not having a workforce if we're not careful. And I think we also need to take a look at the fact that a 5.38% quote-unquote cost of living adjustment is still about 3% less than current inflation and about 1.5% less than last year's inflation. And that doesn't include fuel or groceries. Those don't count in the inflationary numbers. So I think that we really need to slow down a little bit on this thinking and start coming up with different solutions. I've been screaming for 3 years that we need to look at alternative funding methods. Maybe now's the time to have the conversation.
Okay, Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Julianne, let me kind of wrap my head around this. You basically are asking us to start looking at the budget process backwards, plugging in these numbers now that the citizens voted in a minimum pay, and we're going to have to start trying to get there as soon as we can. So if we start now plugging these numbers in, then we can kind of know where we're going at.
So
Am I?
let me correct what you're saying. I don't believe that we're looking at budget backwards. It may be different than what you've looked at before, but people are our greatest asset and value.
Right.
People ought to be the first thing we establish what we're going to do with for the budget year, and then we decide what comes next. So backwards, I'm not sure that's exactly what you were trying to say. We haven't done it in this order in prior years, but I believe it's the proper order to start with. So I believe we need a desired scenario as to how we're going to compensate our people as fairly as we can, knowing the constraints of the budget we deal with, and then build from there.
Well, I think my point is this: naturally, we need to start doing the right thing. And our employees, our Board of County Commission employees, are underpaid, grossly underpaid. But can we afford to go to the $15 an hour, take the big bite of the apple? We only have so much pie, and the pie is only so big, and we can't print money like other government agencies can do that. So we have to, if we give a bigger piece of the pie over here, somebody else is getting a smaller piece.
Yep,
And we all are seeing fuel and everything going up. So my concern of that, and just for the knowledge, on page 6, actually, what we're gonna come up to, the board only gets 34.38% of the ad valorem taxes. So it's not like we're loaded with money here. You know, we're mandatory to provide public service, and I'll always support the sheriff in that endeavor.
Sure.
So, you know, I think this is a good start. I wish we could go to 15.
Sure.
I want to go to 15. I want to do the right thing by the employees, but I don't want to put us out of business trying to get there. And then we have no roads, no drainage, no nothing takes place because
You're right.
we can't afford it.
You're right.
We can't afford the
Absolutely.
fuel. Yeah, we'd love to bring a dump truck load of Ron rock out there. We can't afford to deliver it. I mean, because that's the bottom line. There's only one piece of pie.
That's right.
And I like pie, but I don't mind having a little sliver of pie if I can have pie down the road.
Right.
And I'm not ever going to not fund the sheriff's department and the first responders,
Sure.
period. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Adamczak?
So I guess I think there's 3 different subjects here, and I honestly think they should be handled separately. There's the path to the $15 an hour mandate for 2026. I think the way that, you know, if I was to be able to take a hammer and say this is how the commission should do it, we should figure out what that number we want to be at in 2026 to be competitive is, and we should map that path to the minimum wage to that number. There's a separate path for people at some point, and we discussed it with staff, that at some point we have to get to the point where we're performance measured for our increases in salaries and different things. And I think with salaried employees, we can do that in that thing. So I think that should be a separate path. You know, because we're not trying to get them up to minimum wage because they're not operating that minimum wage. And then for a COLA, I think again, that's a time of the budget decision based on what we have to be able to fund a COLA to what extent. I mean, I guess when I was running for office and what we discussed, the first COLA that you did, you know, they went 10 years with no raises, and that's disastrous, and that can't happen again. But you know, the majority of businesses don't keep up with inflation and a measured basis. It's not, this just isn't how it works. In my peers at my particular employer, I got the highest rating you can get, and I got 5%, and that was a miracle. It's the biggest raise I've gotten in 5 years. It has nothing to do with inflation. It has to do with what the company can afford and what the county can afford. And I hope we can afford to give them 8%. I just don't know if we can or not until we're at that point, and we could judge that 5.38% against all the other things that we have to decide upon, whether it be fire service, the sheriff's department, and all those things, because I do agree with Mr. Harvey. Some things do need to be prioritized, and there is a reason why some pay scales in different positions are different than others. And there's also reasons why some pay scales for some of our constitutionals are different, because those people doing some of them jobs are doing different types of work that require that to be competitive, to have people in the seats. So I really think this needs to be broken out into 3 areas. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Turner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I'd like to start by saying I agree that we need to change the way we do budgets around here. And the thing that pisses me off as bad as anything else since I've been here is when I get the answer, well, this is the way we've always done it. That's not acceptable answer to me. So I appreciate that we're gonna change this around, and we're gonna actually build it around what we can afford on our employee side of this, and we're gonna make the other stuff work best as we can. Because if it comes to putting in an extra culvert or whatever, that we could wait off a year on the culvert, but we can treat our employees better, I'm for the employees. So what I'd like to do here is, I don't think we can get to $15. I don't. I wish we could, but we can't. I think it's gonna hurt like the devil to just go in there and try to get to 13, and with the 5.8. I'm assuming that if somebody that makes, if getting them to the $13 minimum doesn't give them the 5.38, then they'd get 13 plus the difference in the 5.38, or they'd get 5.38 because that would take them over the 13.
We can ensure that does happen. Yep, I got your
Where they
scenario.
don't get hung up in the middle. 'cause
It's gonna
that's
be a handful of
completely
people. Yep, we can manually calculate that.
Okay. I also want to support everybody, but let's keep in mind here that, what's it been, 2 years ago that fire and rescue was a really big deal around here? I mean, it always has been, but we had the committee meetings, and we had the recommendations, and we had, morale was terrible, and we brought in a director of fire services, done a hell of a job over the last year or so being here, and since he's been here, that's moving things in the right direction. Go talk to one of the firemen or the paramedics or whatever around right now, and I kind of challenge you to find somebody that's not in a better frame of mind and in a better state than they were when Mr. Grimes took over. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We all knew it was gonna cost some money, but we've methodically moved into the direction of most of the recommendations that came out of committee. That was used as a template to kind of move us where we are to today. Like I said, we knew it was gonna cost more money, and this is just part of it. One of my concerns is, and it's happened for the last several years, is that if we don't go in and say what we're gonna do and what we mean to do up front, then we're gonna be holding the last little bit of the last little drop of water in the bucket after everybody else gets done with us. I think we've got to fix this. That's why I was for the 9 people. That's why I'm for staff recommendation to get to 13 now and see if we can do any better next year with the 5.38, because it matches the state. If we don't value our people to the point to where we give them at least the same COLA that the state gives, then none of us should be sitting behind this counter, not one of us. So I do believe that we need to go with the 5.38 in staff recommendation, and we should go ahead and try to build in the $13 an hour, even though we only have to get to 11 this year, I think.
Correct.
So I think that it's just like in private industry. The $11 an hour doesn't mean anything anymore in private industry. People that pick up trash in the yard make $15 an hour now in the private industry in the world, but they don't have benefits, and they don't have all the, the government side of this. So I think it's getting back to the point that it was many years ago, where if you want the benefits and you want the security and you want the different things, then go work for the government. You might make a little bit less money, but you get all these other things you're not gonna get in private industry. And so, that's what I'd like to see us do. I'd like to see us go ahead and build in this for the employees and take staff recommendation and get the 13 this year right off the get-go and make the rest of the budget fit the employees instead of the other way around like they've done in the past. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Rawls?
You know, we've given 12% in pay raises over a 13-year period of time that I'm aware of. But inflation didn't stop over those 13 years. It continued to erode the spendability and the household income of the people that work for the county over those 13 years. There's less than a $700,000 difference between $13 an hour and $15 an hour. But my real concern, honestly, is the people that are north of $15 an hour. The ones that are stuck between 15 and 20 that are not going to see any appreciable increase in their household budget because it's being chewed away at a faster rate by inflation than we can give it to them at 5.38%. I don't think that this is a good starting point. I would not vote against this if it was the only thing that I was able to vote on, but I can tell you that this is not, we're not doing right by the employees by taking one suggestion and not going through every possible scenario and looking at everything. We're just taking and this is just my estimation, this is a knee-jerk reaction. It's the first time we've discussed it, and it's the only thing we're looking at. So, the state of Florida, they did it their way. Bucky's gas station does it their way, and Wendy's does it their way. But if, you know, one question I wrote here was, when do we do a salary survey? When was the last time we did a meaningful salary survey and looked at every position in the county to see where we stack up against other municipalities or other businesses that have the same type of staff? I can promise you that the benefits in Putnam County are not that great, that people are going to stick around here for this kind of abuse. We don't have that good of benefits. Some people here enjoy better benefits than others and do less work. Maybe we should take a look at shifting some of that around, but I think on the surface, this is just, I think we're jumping too quick to a conclusion here. We need to spend more time at this, but it should start off with a salary survey. The city of Palaca did one. I requested a copy of that, not received that yet. But I think we need to look at doing something different than just this. But if this is the road we go down, I will vote in favor of it only, but I will also do it in duress.
Okay, Commissioner Adamczak?
So I want to be clear. I want to do more than this for the employees, exactly like Commissioner Rawls is saying. So when I said the 5.8% or 8% or a bigger number, I want to have more data at the end of our budgeting cycle to see if we can get more. If you're saying today is the day we're going to decide this, then I'm for $13 an hour and 5.88%, because I think we need to get above so the people actually are taking home a little bit more who aren't in that group that goes from $10 to $13 an hour, who's getting a 30% jump, which is what we got to do. We got to get there at some point. But I just want to make sure no one misunderstood what I was saying is trying to give less. I'm trying to give more. And I think we need to give at least a 0.5 percentage point above if we're going to get people to where they need to be able to buy those groceries and the gas and the other things. I think we can make a more educated decision on the COLA portion of it if we await the more inputs later in the cycle. But if we're voting on it today, I'd much rather that motion be to a 0.5 point at least above what the COLA we're offering is with that same minimum wage of 13.
13, okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree. I think we should do as much as we possibly can, and this is just kind of a starting point, if you will. I'm sure staff will bring us back. I have met with staff numerous times. I've sat down and went over all the scenarios. I think this is a great starting point. What we need to be mindful of is our insurance costs, too. And when you look at that, you might very well find out that you might be 7 or 8%. And I know that that doesn't relate, but it does relate because we're self-funded now. So I think it's a good starting point for us to have the conversation, and we'll keep an eye on this during the budget. And if we can move that number up, I think we're all in agreement to that. Mr. Chairman, well, when you're ready for a motion, I'll be glad to make one.
Okay, Commissioner Turner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you can turn my light off. That's almost what I was going to say verbatim. This is just a starting point to get us started in the right direction. We're doing it differently than we have in the past. We're building our budget around the people instead of giving them the crumbs that are left over. So it's a different way to do it. I'm all for it. We can always make it go up if we can find the money later in the budget cycle. So I'm ready to second your motion, Mr. Harvey, whenever you're ready.
Okay, Commissioner Rawls, and then we'll move to a motion.
Why are we in a hurry? Why are we in a hurry?
So we can build a budget.
Oh, we're not ready to,
You gonna leave let the employees have the crumbs instead of
So,
building the
is-
budget around the minimum for the employees?
so that, is it your assertion that we are gonna come back and look at this? I think if this is the starting point, we should be starting higher and then build a budget around that, because what's gonna happen, I have no faith whatsoever that these numbers are gonna change. I really think that you're just, I think you're blowing smoke if you tell me that we're gonna have a meaningful conversation, because we haven't done anything up until this point. And yeah, okay, we're changing the way we do budgeting, which is great, but we're not starting at the right starting point, which is looking at a salary survey to see what other folks are paying around us. What is this I mean, this is just based on a reaction because the state went to 15, we're gonna go to 13, but we're not competing with anybody. We're not even matching anybody. I think we need to slow down.
Mr. Turner?
Mr. Chairman, this doesn't surprise me, but I guess the point I wanna make is I think we do need to move forward. And we're gonna do what we're gonna do. I think this is the kudos need to be given here instead of scolding staff or trying to come up with a different way and a better way to move forward, which is what they've been trying to do for several years around here. Instead of obstruct the process, we need to try to move forward if we possibly can. Mr. Harvey, you want me to take a shot at this, or would you like to?
I got it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready? Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move forward with the scenario of the 5.38 COLA and the minimum wage of $13 an hour.
I'll second that.
We've got a proper motion on the floor and a proper second. We open it up for discussions. Commissioner Adams-Ack.
Julianne, I know from discussions that we've had and with staff when we met in a big group there,
Yes, sir.
do we know what half a point of COLA would cost the county to go from 5.38 to, let's say, 5.88?
No, sir.
So we have no, well,
We can run that scenario, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
not even a swag, like, is it?
Not
It's
doing
not $10 million, because the total is 2
Got
point
employees
something million.
watching us right now. We don't need to.
I know this is new for you, and the three to your
Yeah.
side will laugh, but I'm
No,
not
I'm
gonna
just
guess
trying to see,
numbers
if
for
it's
you.
only $80,000, then what's it hurting? If it's $450,000 or $800,000, that makes a big difference.
We'll look at it, and I'll bring you the number back, but I'm not guessing at it today.
All right.
Or as Commissioner Turner said, can we not have those discussions as we move forward through
Yes,
this
sir, we
budget
can.
process? That has been changed. We've already had one update,
Yes, sir.
okay, that we have never had before.
Yes, sir.
And we're gonna have another one at our next meeting,
Yes, sir.
which we've never had that one before either.
Yes, sir.
We're starting it a little different, so when you ask for change, we're trying to change something. Staff got together, y'all met about this
Numerous times.
numerous
So
times.
about how long would it take to get that number? And I would hope the whole board would want that type of number.
Is
Before
that-
we move forward, is that? what
No,
you-
no, for
Oh.
Is that-
commitment to, so we have the information, because we're gonna have further discussions.
I can send it out to you it won't take long, unfortunately. I'm in meetings all day tomorrow, so Thursday I'll send an email out.
And
to tell
end
you
of
what
the
half
week.
point is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all I want.
All right,
Yes,
so
sir.
there's a change happening,
Yes, sir.
whether you like it or not. And when I got here 6 years ago, and I can say that, 6 years ago, they hadn't gotten a raise. Nobody.
Nobody.
In some 10 years. It's ridiculous. Whatever those circumstances were, I wasn't on that board, I'm on this board. And each one of these budgets have been different and challenging, and this one's no different. So, Commissioner Rawls?
Yeah, so there's $354,000 if we increase 170 employees, $1 an hour for 1 year. So if we deduct 2868, I'm going to answer Mr. Adams that question here.
You don't need to. She's gonna give us the answer by Friday.
I'd like to know myself.
So you want us
So
to
it's a
sit here?
$172,000 difference at 5%. That's what your 5.38 equals. And I'm using that based on the numbers I'm looking at, where we go from $13 an hour to 14 and increase everybody else. So when I deduct the $14 an hour, that $1 difference, 180 people, 2,080 work hours a year, doesn't include overtime, obviously, you're at $172,000. So, again, I think we're going forward a little bit too quickly. There's been some questions put on the table. I think the question being answered, I think the biggest question is, why aren't we doing a salary survey? It may show us we need to be at $25 an hour to start, who knows? But, you know, if we don't have all the answers, we really can't make an informed decision. So I'll vote to get the employees every penny we can get them, but at the same time, I think we need to do it in a more meaningful manner.
Call for
All right,
question.
we got a proper motion, a proper second on the floor. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, now Julianne.
Yes, sir. Now we'll go to item
Item
B.
B.
Again, fiscal year budget development. One of the items that I need some direction on is that last year we went to a formulaic approach as to how we give additional funding above and beyond last year's appropriation to the constitutionals. We went to a percent-based funding scenario where we took the percent that they were allocated of their appropriation from ad valorem, and then of the net new revenue, so those things that were deducted off the top, what we had left. If you'll remember, originally, the board held back 20%. At the end of the year, the board released that 20% to be distributed according to that formulaic funding. So what I have brought to you is just a hypothetical. If we start this year where we ended last year without the board's 20%, and/or if you want to take that off the top before you have your net new revenue, I just need to know what the board's desire is as to how we move forward. It is time for me to send out some information to the constitutionals on what this year's budget development is going to look like, FRS rates, all of those things. And so as part of that, I'd like to give them as much information as I possibly can. I have given you a few factors that play into net new revenue or some lessons learned from last year to this year. One of those being that last year we calculated the percent that the property appraiser or constitutional officer should have received in growth. However, their budget is set by DOR and approved by DOR. So when they went to DOR with their request, they actually ended up with over 100,000 more in net new growth than what we would have allocated based on our percent funding that we made all the rest of the constitutionals agree to. What happened at that point, because we had already funded everybody, was that was deducted from the board's allocation. And then there are just some additional third parties that the board should consider as they understand what's funded out of that general fund, and if we want to make any request of any of these other third parties, so the state's attorneys, public defenders, guardian ad litem, should we be speaking to them, or would the board like staff to be speaking to them about the percent of growth that we're asking them to maintain or stay within at any point during this budget development cycle?
Okay, start with questions, Commissioner Rawls.
I think before we make a decision, we should allow the constitutionals to engage us and answer the question and see how this impacts them. Last year, I don't think that they were really given any time to do that. So again, if we're not in a huge hurry, I think we should invite all the constitutionals to come in either one at a time or all in one afternoon. I don't know why we couldn't do it all in one afternoon, and get their input before we start changing the way we fund them. I was not in favor of this last year. I'm not in favor of this year.
Okay, Commissioner Turner.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the, couple of things. First off, we voted last year, the board voted that we were gonna do a percentage deal. The board, including me, the board caved in and gave back the 20%. So basically what we were gonna do is the board gets to set the funding dollars. So it gives you the opportunity to accept portion or all of or none of the rollback rate to try to reduce taxes. That gives us that opportunity. If the board sets how much it's gonna be, and then we were gonna keep 20% to do things that we decided to take that 20% last year and give that 20% back to the constitutionals. But that doesn't change the fact that it's a good deal. The constitutional officers now can take their percentages, can build that in, and if they just can't make it for some reason, they can come before and ask for a portion of the 20%. I would hope that they wouldn't just come ask for it because it's there and actually have a need for that 20%. But I also don't believe the constitutionals ought to be paying 15 or a higher COLA than we are. I think that we all ought to stay on board here when we do this, and that we all ought to stay in the deal. I also believe that the property appraiser this year needs to go to the Department of Revenue and get his budget earlier than what he did last year, if possible. Maybe it's not possible, to where maybe we don't run into the same issue where we fund his by his percentage and then turn around and have to give him part of the board's percentage because we have no say-so on the approved budget. So hopefully we can get around that this year. I hope so. And, but other than that, I think we need to let this ride out one more year and just see if it actually works. Last year, it got cloudy a little bit because we ended up giving the 20% back and then giving back even more that came out of ours. So I think we need to let it stay where it is on the not to exceed the percentages that we have on here of the original deal, which was 80% of whatever the amount of money that the board decides to charge on millage rate. I think that's what it is.
Net new revenue.
Yeah,
Is it
clarify
net
that, it's
new revenue?
net new revenue.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Adams-Act?
Yeah, overall, just like last year, I'm not really for this. I don't like the way that it kinda, I'd like to hear from the constitutionals. I'd like to hear from our executive directors and all of that on where they want their budget to be, where they need it to be, and distinguish between wants and needs and must-haves and should-haves and could-haves and all that stuff, and have those discussions and figure out where we can fund people fully and where we're unable to. If we are unable to, hopefully we can fund everything we can with what we got, but we don't know that till those things are presented to us. I think as soon as we did this last cycle, it kind of shut those conversations off. I don't know why they got shut off, but basically it didn't happen anymore. So if that same result is going to happen, I'm definitely not for it. I think the outputs that we had, that we gave to the public, we had a good 5 years where we had all these great things that we could hand to the public and say, hey, here's some bar graphs and some graphs and 60-some pages of what explained our budget to some level. I actually didn't think that was enough explanation. And we went from that to just a couple pages and an agenda. I get it. The public could have, just like I did, they could have went and asked for extra data and gotten 500 spreadsheets and all kinds of data and figured it out for themselves, but I don't think the public should have to do that. And that's what anyone from the public would have had to have done, to extrapolate any information about how we're spending their money from last year's budget with what we produced and what we published. So I stand against this.
Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to sound confrontational. I don't mean it to be, but these are constitutional officers elected by the same people we're elected by. And I have full faith and confidence that they can manage the money that they're having. I don't think I need to micromanage the sheriff's department, the clerk of the court, or any of them. I'm just throwing that out there. We did go to a sliding scale last year. We went to a percentage base, thinking that would be in the future. I didn't hear from any other constitutional that was upset to the point where it was just, they were furious about it. We all told them there was anomalies. If they had an anomaly, they could come back to us and let us know. Personally, I don't need the sheriff to come in here or any of the constitutionals with 1,500 pages of documents to prove that they're protecting our people. That's their job to do that, and they're elected to do that. And okay, that's all I'm gonna say about that. I do want to ask one question. Julianne, you said that in the past, on page 4, that the sheriff is going to get $1.125 million of recurring money as long as we're fiscally constrained county.
Correct.
How is that going to come to us? Do you
My understanding is it's gonna come straight to the, from the state to the board, just like their other grants have in the past. And it's my understanding that that would be effective July 1st. So that you may actually see those dollars or some of those, some prorated of those dollars this fiscal year that is intended for this initiative, as the state recognizes the underpaid public safety personnel and made a specific initiative to try and assist those wages of those law enforcement officers and correction officers.
Well, I'm in full support of that. I think that's a wonderful idea. You know, one day, I don't know how this reoccurring sound's gonna be.
I hear you.
And one day, the reoccurring faucet might shut off, and I mean, let's make no bones about it, then we're on the hook. You can't ask
Absolutely.
people to take a pay cut at that point.
Absolutely.
Who would?
Which we have a number of funding sources based on our fiscally constrained status. And so, yes, this would be one more of those that we would have to account for. But it's my understanding that in the next immediate future, that's a pretty protected status that we maintain.
Yeah, I agree. Unless we get a change of government, which God forbid we ever do that.
Okay,
So,
fair.
But I'm in support of what we started last year, and I welcome any constitutional officer who, if they want to have a conversation, I'm willing to do that. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Adamsack?
So this is what we would call macro management with micromanaging on the backside. So basically, we're saying we're gonna macromanage you by saying this is the absolute amount that you can have. And if you want anything else, come to us. And at that point, we're micromanaging any overage that you may need as the sheriff's office, as the clerk of court, supervisor election. We're not allowing you to go out there and come up with a budget and say, this is what I need. And if it happens to be above 34.38 or 2.34 or 54.25, we just macromanage you into that 54.25. We didn't listen to your input. Then on the backside of it, we're going to micromanage you by saying, well, if you need something beyond that, you can come up here and you can ask us for it. That's exactly what micromanagement is, and that's exactly what we'd be doing after the macromanagement of a mandate. So, again, I stand against it.
Commissioner Rawls?
So based on 272 employees at the Sheriff's Department, at 1.25 million, assuming a 35% labor burden is worth $1.43.5 per employee. That's $1.43 an hour that the state's going to give. So that don't let that $1.25 million sound like a lot of money, because in the real world, it's not a lot of money. You know, we're fiscally constrained because we lost 1,000 people supposedly. I'll tell you right now, I think that's a bunch of bunk. I think that our census was mishandled. I think we got a lot more than, we didn't lose 1,000 people. We gained more people. I think we hit that threshold, but I think it benefits some people to keep us under 75,000. But with that said, I am not going to vote in favor of continuing down this road until I speak to the constitutionals at that podium and get their input. Maybe they say, look, give us whatever percentage you want, we'll live within it. But at the same time, they have to be able to set their budget, keep their employees keep the pay at a level that they keep their employees. You know, we gave accolades this morning to some ladies at the clerk of court. If for some reason they're not able to keep up with inflation and keep up with the pay of other clerks of courts, there's a lot of courthouses within 45 miles of Putnam County. It's not that far to drive. I'll be voting against this.
Okay. Commissioner Turner?
And my question is, what do we need to do here? You need another motion, because there's already policy and a motion that was passed last year, 3-2. Do I need to make a motion that we stay with the same policy that we had?
Yes, sir.
Not to exceed the percentages like we did last year?
If you will, okay.
Okay, we got a proper motion. Got a second?
Second.
You got a proper motion, a proper second. Go with the percentage that were presented last year, not to exceed, and that would be new money,
Net.
correct? New net
Net
revenue.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Any further, Commissioner Adamsack?
So if this goes anything like last year's process, as soon as we made this decision, all transparency to the public outside of what they garnered from their individual commissioner goes to the wayside. I hope that's not the case this year, but that's exactly what happened last year. We had some really good meetings leading up to making this decision last year. The second this decision was made, which was a couple months before the final budget was published and voted on and accepted, we really had no more information to put out to the public outside of 2 pages in an agenda. That's crap, and that's why I stand against it. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, passes 3-2 with Adam, Zach, and Rawls dissenting. We'll take a 3-minute break. We'll start in about 30 seconds. Okay, go ahead and reconvene the Board of County Commissioners workshop. We'll move down to item C, IT server purchase. Julianne, you want to start with that, or?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Along with Mr. Ritchie, who I think will come assist us through this process as well. We're bringing to you an IT server purchase item, which was an addenda to what you had in your minutes. We've had some recent failures that has led to an unexpected need in the IT department. And since my job in IT is to break it and make sure they can fix it, I'm going to turn it over to James to tell you the details of that.
Okay, thank you, James.
Yes, sir. So it's outlined in your summary highlights. We had a maintenance window in February that I believe it was February the 12th, we had a stack of servers that in so many words failed. We was able to move some stuff around and unlock the data we had and got everything back and all that. In going through the last few months and reassessing everything, we have found that our hardware is aging. To be honest, we just aged out past what is recommended. We've had multiple conversations with Commissioner Adams-Zach and my staff. In some sense, we have outgrown our infrastructure. We are virtualizing most of, to do a cost savings to the county to virtualize as many things as we can. And in doing that, we have outgrown the infrastructure that was in place. We did have hardware, like I said, our current production stack goes out next year where everything's running at right now for the county. Last 2 Thursdays ago, I don't know that date off the top of my head, but we had 6 hard drives fail in one of our storage clusters. And it wiped all of our backups out and toasted them. And fortunately, we was able to restore all of that, or to get all of our backups backed up and all that. But what you see before you today is a solution to replace our production stack with a new supported infrastructure. Our current infrastructure really doesn't have any stateside support. At all. We actually go through forums with forums online, things of that nature. This particular either one of these options that you see in your packet, it has support stateside. We can actually pick up the phone and call someone, or put in a ticket, either way, and get response rather immediately. And then, of course, our storage boxes for all of our data. That was our one storage box is going out next year as well, I believe. And so we're kind of it was bought last year, so we have about 2 years on it. I correct myself there. But that's kind of where we're at with our infrastructure. It genuinely needs to be replaced. And it wasn't on any kind of a schedule to be replaced. Along with these purchases, we will have a replacement schedule. And built into our budget, it is built into our budget now, going on, I should say, for next year, as we're working on budget discussions. But that's kind of, like I said, that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, questions, Commissioner Turner first?
Okay. I had this conversation yesterday with Miss Young, and we were talking about that while we recognize that this is all necessary, but I don't know that it's got to be done right now. And so what amount of money out of the $331,749, what gets you up and running right now to where we could budget the other and split this up into a 2-year period. What amount is that?
So, we really have to have our storage servers, and I believe that number is gonna be on that first page. Looked at $105,000.
Okay, so you got to have 105 grand to get these servers up and running that have just died and crashed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so the remainder of the money in today's request could actually be budgeted in the next year's budget.
I believe, yes, sir, it could.
And then is there any of this additional equipment that is being requested today that if it crashed would shut the county down? Or would it be something that we could operate and talk about it again like we're doing this $105,000 worth that we need, that we got to have it, that if something else breaks, we're in dire trouble. But
So we can, to be honest with you, it's kind of what happened last 2 Thursdays ago, 2 weeks ago. We basically over the weekend and the first Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, operations on the IT side were extremely slow for everyone across the county. Every constitutional, everyone that attaches to our network, all the BOCC departments. And we were playing musical servers, so to speak. And so we got by. My fear is that if we don't act, at least with the storage servers, and like I said, we have a year in our production cluster now, which is a total of 6 servers. We've got a year left on that. So we're okay as far as maintenance and support goes for that at the moment. But it's a great possibility.
Absolutely necessary today is the 105. It needs to happen.
As soon as possible, and I'll tell you why. It's because the lead time of getting this is 6 months. We ordered it today. 6 months is, that's the lead time on it, and not guaranteed. We ordered a totally different thing, to a different project, but our cores we ordered last year, or excuse me, the beginning of this year, I've not got a tracking number because they're not shipped yet. And so we're looking at a long time to get them in.
Well, I know we don't usually take up things like this, but this is an emergency situation. I think we're gonna have to take this up today, and
Right.
do something. So I'm ready for a motion whenever you're ready, Mr. Chairman. I see you got more lights lit up.
Okay,
I'm good.
you're off and on and off and on there. Okay. Commissioner Rawls?
You physically lost 4 hard disk drives at one time.
6.
What caused that?
We're investigating that. Commissioner Adamczak has requested that we send those drives back. We do an RMA on them, return them. We're going to ask for diagnosis. What it looks like to us is that the server chassis was bought and then hard drives, because typically you wouldn't do that. You'd have hard drives would come out of different lots, so that very thing would not happen. The likelihood of it anyways. Well, it looks like to us that the chassis was bought and then hard drives were bought afterwards to save some money for the county. And then it looks like all those hard drives were in the same lot. So that's kind of why we don't know. We're going to find out. Lord willing, we'll find out why that happened, but we do know that 6 faulted at one time on the same day.
Where does Inspire fit into this? What, do they have do they offer any assistance during this time? Because, I contacted you guys, or contacted somebody on a Saturday because I couldn't check my email. And then, found out that, there's an issue, and then this thing went on for like a week. The systems were down, this back in February you're talking about.
Right, yes, sir.
And I've heard varying reasons and all that, but we signed an agreement with Inspire, pretty much ran off our director of IT at the same time, and I'm just trying to figure out how they fit into this. What were they doing when all this is going on? Are they able to lend a hand to us?
In this matter, no, sir, and the reason why is as of February the 28th, I believe our contract was ended with Inspired. They was able to help us get to a spot where my staff could handle the workload. There were some things that we had project-wise that they could not help us with, GIS being one of them, development, various things like that. But we terminated that contract as of the 28th of February, I believe was the date. So in this particular matter, they didn't help us. Now in February,
Go back, so that was a one-year contract we started last summer. That you terminated midstream?
it gave us a 30-day clause out.
What was the reason for terminating that?
We were,
Mr. Chairman, I can help with that if you'd like. When the board approved the $243,000 or so contract with Inspired, it was to provide services to the board, to the IT department throughout the transition and to help on certain projects that needed to get completed. It got to, and the board's direction was when the contract no longer is valuable to where we're not getting the monthly service back for the cost of the contract, to look at moving forward of ending the contract. So after about 3 or 4 months of service with Inspired, there was some conversations between the IT department as well as Inspired and administration, and Inspired themselves said, there's nothing else that we can help you with at this point. So there was no need to continue the contract. And the reason why I haven't brought it back to the board yet is we're still finalizing the final invoices of the contractual agreement, so we can get the final payment out to them and void that contract moving forward. But it got to a point to where Inspired was not able to offer any further service that we weren't able to provide ourselves.
All right. So since the first year I got elected, IT came in and the IT director back then said, I prepared a budget, I presented it, I get nothing. The next year, I prepared a budget, I presented it, I get nothing. I reviewed those budget requests. Now we're having hardware failures. So what do you anticipate as an increase in your total budget amount? You said you're starting to look at that. What's your gut? Are we looking at 25, 50, 75% increase in your budget?
I'd have to run those numbers, to be honest with you. I don't want to pull a number out of the air. We are budgeting new hardware for us, well, depending on how this goes today, we're going to look to replace some nodes in our virtual stack anyways and get, refresh some hardware. A lot of our hardware is old.
Right.
It's just aged. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. But as far as getting you a number, I can get that, what we're looking for, but I don't want to pull a number out of thin air just to, throw it out there.
This is one of those things where, you mentioned that you've been taking advantage of some virtual storage. And in my world, we've gone totally virtual. I mean, I'm
Right.
Chromebook and that's all I need. So, are we looking at those options right now? If we're looking at buying a bunch of hardware, is there not a viable option for and I'm out of school here, so tell me if it's a stupid idea, but is it possible for us to do something like maybe go Linux-based and use cloud storage as a solution, or maybe do Chrome and using Google Workspace?
Right, so there's always, those options, of course. We do have, internally, we have built and what does virtual environment do? We'll basically build we'll call it the Putnam cloud. And so we do run Linux on a lot of our operating systems, run that. We do run Windows, of course, for certain services that we provide, because we just, have to. We have an agreement with Microsoft, of course, and all of that. We do have our own cloud infrastructure, so to speak. It's shared between our 2 data centers in the county. When we're still working on getting, that squared away with the network-wise, but those options are available. We do know that that's something we're going to be looking at in the next few years for email, things of that nature. That's coming down in the next couple of years anyways. We're going to start doing some studies of that for over the entire enterprise for the BOCC and the constitutional offices. But we'll certainly be exploring that type of thing. Cloud storage off-site is very expensive for our amount of data. We've got terabytes upon terabytes upon terabytes of data it's just cheaper to store it locally here in the county and distribute it across data centers. That's just the truth of it.
So what is our redundancy then? If you lost those 6 hard drives, was there any redundancy that salvaged the data that was on there?
No, sir. Our production data is sitting inside of the new storage box that we have bought last year. It's kind of separated out a little bit between different servers right now. We had one box that went.
So what do we lose?
All of our backups were toasted.
Okay, so it's strictly backups?
Right.
Okay. But so you can rebuild those easily?
Yeah, we already did.
Okay.
We did that. That was priority last week. In
You
case
need-
something,
How
wild
is
went
your
on.
staffing level?
Pardon?
How is your staffing? Are you fully staffed?
I have 18, I believe I think it's 19 staffers, if I'm not mistaken. We have a vacancy that we are looking to fill.
8.
18. We have 18, no, excuse me, we have one position
position.
we're looking to fill.
So you're
and
pretty much fully
we're
staffed?
pretty much full staffed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Adamsack?
I thought we had some, well, I guess we didn't budget it, but I thought we had some hardware capital stuff in the budget, and then we set it aside because we were waiting to see what we do ARPA money for. Was any servers part of that? What was in that? Because we kind of set it aside because, oh, maybe we'll use ARPA, and then we never really had a discussion because we chose not to use ARPA for that. I thought that was like 380K or something, wasn't it? Somewhere around there. That's off the top of my head. But it was over 300,000, I think. And I think part of it we did spend. I think we got the switches, right? Was that part of that?
I think
So that's-
that come from different funding sources, but,
Okay, so that didn't even come from that. And then we have this money coming back from the contractor who didn't work out or did everything they could for us. What is that, like 120, let's say it's half. It sounds like it's gonna be more than that, but, at what point do we keep saying no to capital expenditures for IT when, they presented them to us as the needs? And we kind of voted yeah, but let's talk about it after we decide what we're doing with ARPA. We decide what we're gonna do with ARPA, now's the time to address it. I don't know, the risk, if this had happened so even though it happened in the backup environment, the idea that they had to work on the backup environment and spend that activity level, not just human activity level, the activity level on the other servers and stuff to get that from production to backup impacted every business in this county as far as our businesses, our core people. Our county employees, all of our constitutional offices, there was transactions that could not happen because the power of the system wasn't good enough to do a full backup to get that recovery status back and do our regular day-to-day IOs. So that impacted the county beyond just backup. So I just want to be clear on that. That's my understanding.
yes, sir.
I witnessed it because stuff wasn't working. I had a conversation with Mr. Suggs. I was like, hey, I can't send an email. I can't do this. We had that problem. My concern is the ask is for in production. If this happened in production, you're talking about, how long would it have taken you if we lost production to get that back up and running where you'd be flat down?
Days.
Days.
Easy.
And that's basically, the county isn't operating during those days. So we're not doing anything. We're not emailing, we're not doing anything. We can't take a transaction. He can't get people in and out of court. It affects everything. So I just want to make sure that we're presenting this in the way that is appropriate. I will say this, the odds of having multiple drives in the same RAID set fail at the same time is supposed to be in the 9/9s. So it's not supposed to happen. So that's why I asked them to send those drives back and say, hey, what happened here? I have assumptions. They're industry assumptions, so I couldn't go into too much detail, but it does have to do with lots. It does have to do with the vendor. Hopefully that doesn't play out, but if it does, maybe we have something to stand on there as well. In the meantime, I would ask them to send you net new drives to sit on the side till you feel comfortable that the drives that we have here at the county are adequate.
Sure.
They can say no, but that would make no sense to say no to that because they cause us impact. So I'm for moving the whole thing ahead only because if this happened in production, we're done. We wouldn't have taken on it. If this happened in production during the election cycle, or this happened in production during the week that you don't know when these things happen. You just don't know. That's why it's called disaster recovery. That's why the word disaster is applied to it. It is a marketing term, so IT companies can make you feel scared. But the bottom line is there's a reason they call it disaster. I'd like to see us be able to get you guys that. I don't even think it comes close to what we're saving by not having the contractor and by not funding what was asked for in the beginning of the year. So I think we're still within a couple $100,000 below what IT department asked for in this fiscal year to begin with.
Okay, Commissioner Turner?
Yes. You ask several questions of staff and then you just interrupt them and let them answer. So if I could follow up a little bit on that, I'd appreciate it. So I understand there's some money left on this Spire and we don't know exactly how much that is yet, the Spire contract. So, and I know it's hard for you to estimate things because you're precise in your numbers. So how much would you say that would be?
I estimate that you're gonna have 160,000 left that we had essentially set aside. Now, remember, we left those funds in the general fund, and as we reviewed in our quarter one report, there was a pending amount, basically. So those funds are not necessarily left over, they're sitting in general fund reserves, but of what we anticipated to spend on Inspired versus what we will actually spend on Inspired, I believe you're gonna have 160 left.
Okay, and on top of that, Commissioner Adamsack referred to an amount of money that was put in the budget originally this year to do some of this, but we held off. Do you have an idea of how much that is?
Yes, sir. The original capital request that we had tentatively moved for, or we tabled for an ARPA discussion, was 90,000 for Wi-Fi 6 upgrades, 162 for the replacement of the core routers, and upgrade to the access control system for 62. So that's a total of 314.
So that was
We
not
did-
money that was budgeted, that was money that was
Requested.
talked about and requested.
We
So the
did-
money wasn't ever budgeted even, so we didn't budget the money and then put it off for ARPA.
No.
We didn't do that, so basically it was just a request that was made up front that was never funded.
Correct. And of that, we have already taken care of the purchase for the core routers, which was more than the original budget request due to market conditions and all of those factors, obviously. So one of those three items has already been budgeted and the purchase order cut. However, we don't have an estimated date as to when they'll be in because of the world of IT components.
Okay, so basically the only money that we have really, that we've, is the Aspire that we have, the Aspire monies, which is 160, did you
Yep,
say?
that's my estimate.
We have about 160 to go towards this where it wouldn't cost money that hasn't already been earmarked for something that we're not gonna use it for that issue.
Yes.
So the the 105 is what is critical that you get today.
Yes, sir.
And then that would give us an opportunity to workshop and try to come up with just not throwing money at this issue, except for what we absolutely have to. That's what, I don't mind funding this like Commissioner Adamsack said. My problem is I think we need to discuss it more, but we don't have time on this $105,000 worth of stuff you've got to have. Best I can tell, it needs to be done today. So with us not trying to do stuff in workshop unless it's an emergency situation such as this commissioner would like to make a motion, if you would, Mr. Chairman, that we go ahead and fund the 105,000 for the routers, or what, is that the correct word?
Server and servers, storage servers.
Storage servers today, and that we place this other issue on the agenda to see how we can get it there, or do we just wanna just fund it next year? So that would be mine, to let's fund it today.
We've got a proper motion to fund the 105, and we got a proper second to fund 105,
I do have a question.
and then to move this to the next available workshop, which would be in May, for discussions of how to fully fund the rest of it, either in this budget year or next year. Okay? All right, Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ritchie, you said earlier that even if we bought today, it's 6 months out. So we're going to be in next fiscal year before we ever get the, now, my question to you is, we've seen this time and time again, that we set a figure of 105, but it might not come back at that.
Right.
Do you feel comfortable at the 105, or should we say up to 110, or whatever the case may be? Because if we're going to say 105 and it's going to come back at 106.7,
Right.
then we're back in here asking for more money.
Sure.
Well, my biggest concern if we change that is if the people who were buying this router from find out that price just went up to 130 or whatever it may be. So I would feel more
Yeah.
comfortable. I understand,
I
I'm on
get it.
board with what you're saying, I really am, and we
situation
don't
many
wanna
times.
stop this, you know, but maybe a better way to handle it would be to let the administrator and the chairman has power to
Yeah.
do certain things here without changing anything.
good then.
So let's let them
I'm
just,
good.
if there's a little change here and there, let's just let them deal with it and move on.
I'm fine, thank you.
Commissioner Adamsack?
Shut up.
Okay, Commissioner Rawls?
Just, we're going with ThinkMate, is that what okay, is that what you prefer to go with? If you had your own decision-making abilities, would you go with that equipment?
Yes, we've actually we tried to get a quote from Dale, and we was not unable to get one back. I know that we were the quote we had before, prior to looking at some different options and all, they were dramatically different than ThinkMate.
I just want to make sure you're not settling at this point. If there's something that's more beneficial
Right.
to the citizens, if we had to even spend more money doing it. But if this is equipment that you're satisfied with and we're going to stick with, I got no problem with it.
I'm good with it, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Adamsack?
I do think, and I'm gonna re-stress this, that you need to go back to the vendor on the drives that we do have here. This can be 6 months, and they need to put a couple of spares on site, and
Yes, sir.
again, they may say no, but if, we need to put as much pressure on them as can be, because, again, had this happened in production, whole different game. And again, it would have been newsworthy, Plaquemine Daily News would have had it all over if they saw that, you know, probably would have made Action Jack's news, like I've had the pleasure to make a couple times. If you know, the county was flat out down and people couldn't do their license transactions and things like that. So that just gets you a little quicker time to replace parts and things like that. And I think they owe it to us as a vendor to help us out, because that caused the issue. It's, if you have warranty and you have all that, they're ultimately responsible for that. Thank you.
Okay, we got a proper motion, a proper second on the floor. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Okay, item D, Public Works, HVAC systems.
Mr. Chairman, this is almost the exact same situation, just a different piece of equipment. How many of these are busted now and ain't running?
They're actually all running now except for part of the Palaca Library. It has a two compressor system. One of those compressors is out, so the Palaca Library is only running on one compressor right now. But these are our oldest units out there that's on this list. And so again, this was 220 we had budgeted, and then we pushed it forward to ARPA.
I apologize for not getting you to talk with you ahead of time about this, which is usually what I try to do, but if you had to, out of these units that you have listed here, if you had to start replacing them on a methodical basis, where you replaced one or two and, you know, whatever, instead of just, well, let's go ahead and just replace them all because we can, because we got to have some kind of physical responsibility around here. So which ones of these would you replace first?
It would be the Palaca Library, the tax collector's office, and then the county health department. The other three are above planning and development over here. They are old. We have had to fix them, but there's others in this building that can.
So those are the three worst ones, are those three right there, and they're mostly standalone units, so when it goes
Correct.
out, the building's hot.
Yes.
Where this one here, most areas have more than one unit, so it just works the other one harder. Okay, so out of those three units that you just called for, how much of the 220,000 would you need to cover those three units?
I believe it's roughly around almost 120 for those three.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we allocate $120,000 to do those three units that are necessary.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a proper motion by Commissioner Turner to do the three necessary units. Proper second by Commissioner Harvey. We will start discussion now. Commissioner Rawls?
So on the tax collector, that's currently a chilled water system, correct?
They have several of them in there.
So you're not changing that?
No.
Because that
This-
thing leaks.
This one is located in the ceiling above a bathroom. It's in bad shape, and we can't, it just costs so much to repair that one because of the location it is in.
Well, the last time I was in there, the hydronic system was leaking, and that takes care of, I believe, most of that building.
It doesn't, but we just did a repair to that recently, so, but this one is specifically above.
Is that in the schedule to be replaced? I mean, you can't keep putting bubble gum on a system that old like that forever. Did we have that in the pipeline to get replaced?
It is in the pipeline, again, it's for
Okay.
next year. I've got some other stuff in that pipeline for next year.
Okay.
Because these aren't our only R22 units and our oldest units out there. These are the worst of the ones we have.
And how long has R22 been out?
It's been out for a long time. And actually, we've tried to see if we can convert some of these over to a different, but they're just so old, they won't
You
won't
don't
work.
want to.
No.
Commissioner Adamczak?
I just want to make sure I understood. The three that you're talking about is the tax collector building, Palaca Library, and what was the third one?
The county health department.
Okay. Thank you. I just didn't circle the third one. I didn't.
Okay, and this is gonna fix them?
They will replace them completely, yes.
But only pieces of the buildings, not all of them.
The bad units that are R22 on
Yeah.
those projects. Question.
Okay, got a proper motion, a proper second, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move down to commissioner requests. Commissioner Rawls, you want to go ahead and move up the Bostwick Community Center ahead of it, unless Jay's got to get out of here, because I think it's probably going to take more time than Jay's, if you want to do that one first.
It's up to you. I have no problem with that, yeah. So, I attend the Boston Community Association meetings when I can. They meet monthly at the community center in, downtown Bostwick. And, there's been some concern lately that, there was some changes made where all the locks were changed on the building. They have regularly scheduled meetings. There was no notice given. On top of that, the condition of the building itself, there's been some concerns raised about that. So they'd asked me, what it would take to be able to come in and speak to the group. I told them that it'd be better to speak to us as a workshop than to, try to individualize each commissioner. So they wanted to come in and express their concerns and talk to us about their building.
Okay. All right, there's a number of comment cards. I'm not going to hold those to the end, so I'm going to go ahead and call and have public comment, if that's okay with the commissioners, on this particular item. Douglas Hayes is not here. I'll save him for when we get to regular public comment. All right, so I'm going to just go in order as they were given to me. Mr. Mike Knoll. Is there a particular order you want me to go in?
Yes, sir, if you don't mind.
Okay, what's the order?
We had Bill Rainey,
Okay, he wants to go, when does he want to go?
now, that's okay.
Okay, all right,
And then Joel Dantzler,
okay,
Linda Lazar.
okay. Okay, Bill Rainey? We need to keep this 3 minutes.
Yeah.
This isn't public comment.
Okay, that's fine. If you could, give us your name and, address for the record, please.
My name is Bill Rainey. I'm a resident of Bostwick. I've lived there since.
Okay, and before you get started, we are going to hold this to around 3 minutes, okay, sir?
Excuse me?
We're going to hold this to, your comments to about 3 minutes, okay?
Tell us about the agreements.
No,
I'm sorry, I
okay,
have some hearing problems.
we'll give you 3 minutes.
All right, 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Really, the issues that we wanted to present to you all relate to the community center that was built approximately 2006, 2007 by the county with the joint participation of Bostwick. And for purposes of Bostwick has a corporation that is a member-based nonprofit called BCA, Bostwick Community Association, Inc. Anyway, there had been a previous older building that had been used as a community center, and it burned in 2003. It was apparently a fire after some work was done in the building. It burned to the ground. Bostwick had a contract library in the building and also had established some use of the building as a community center, both for political purposes and also for the Blueberry Festival. There have been several events. Anyway, the county agreed to build the building, and structure-wise, there were two architects. Bostwick had an architect, Bob Hartwig, and you had an architect, Robert Taylor. And so they agreed on the structure and the arrangement of the facilities. The concept was the county would build the building and pay for it and maintain it and pay all expenses on it from now till time immemorial. For that, for Bostwick's participation, they would furnish the building initially with tables, chairs, kitchen equipment, and everything to begin a turnkey basic operation. And they would provide the plants and accessories outside as necessary, and including a sprinkler system. The county, when the building had burned, the county, as I understand it, got approximately $250,000 of insurance proceeds. So they had that kitty to start with. Bostwick raised the money on its behalf and got the inside stuff that it had promised to deliver. That all came about, and basically for a period that was completed probably in roughly 2007. And actually it's operated quite well. That we've been a site for the communities for the Blueberry Festival. We've had a number of political forums there. We've had various events. We've had people who were occupying it. Bostwick's concept of the use of the structure was to benefit the community. They weren't in it to make a profit. They weren't asking the county to contribute any money to help them operate it, but they were operating it. We had Boy Scouts, we had 4-H, we had an AA group, we had a number of users, jamming, bingo, other things of that nature. And the problem that developed was very recent. After 15 years of history, the county decided that keys were out of control, and so they came in one night, no discussion with us, no notice whatsoever. They came in, rekeyed the building. All of a sudden, we had no access to the building, and that still has not been totally resolved. There have been some interim arrangements made. We've got the Bostwick Blueberry Festival coming up in 2 or 3 weeks, which I hope you will attend. There are various improvements that have not been made. The structure is in need of work. There seems to be a beginning of a basic disagreement about the use of the facility. Bostwick has always looked at it as a place for the community to use, and we've taken even the proceeds of the Blueberry Festival and used those for scholarships for kids. I don't know how many scholarships we've been given, but a number. And we even got a match for some of that from the Lafarge over a period of time. $2,000 a year for a couple of students every year. So here we are. We don't know what the future of it is going to be. On our behalf, we would really just like to reestablish the concept that we started with and back up and start it all over again with that concept. I don't know what the county desires, and that's where we are at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rainey. Okay, thank you. Hey, Joel, Mr. Danzler?
Joel Dantzler, 420 Cedar Creek Road, Palatka. And first of all, I'd like to thank each and every one of you guys for supporting us. I know that over the years, I've seen all of you out at our festival, and y'all have always been a big support, as well as the Sheriff's Department. It has just been an awesome thing that we've had, and that's what I love about Putnam. But all of a sudden, come in, and the locks have been changed. Nobody ever came to us. And I think this is just an oversight. I don't think it was ever anything intentional, because I've heard several reasons why they changed the locks, but none of them, one is, well, times are different. Just times are different now. Well, are we peasants and y'all just decide that y'all want to take our rights away from us? It seems like that's what the federal government's doing, is trying to push the small guy. And as far as the way we feel, that's the way we feel like it's been treated. We do the Bostwick Blueberry Festival. Multiple hours are put into that thing. And we've never asked the county for a dime for supporting that, other than do some repairs on the building, and y'all do pay the light bill, and it's appreciated, it really is. The Blueberry Festival, the city's just giving them $160,000, $75,000, whatever, to get the Blueberry Festival. To get the Blue Crab Festival. Anyway, we don't ask you for anything. And I just don't understand why somebody comes in and changes the locks without even coming to us. That would have never happened 3 years ago. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Danzler. Okay, Ms. Linda Bazar?
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Bazar. I live at 368 Cedar Creek Road. I have been a permanent resident of Putnam County since 1999. I became a very active member of the Bostwick Community Association and the Blueberry Festival in 2008. During that time, from then till recently, we had a great relationship with the county, with Parks and Rec. We had no problems at all. Whatever we needed, we could go to somebody, and normally that would get done, whether we needed extra tables, extra chairs, the grass mowed, pressure washing, whatever. All of a sudden, without prior notice, and total disregard for those who have keys to the building, as Joel said, the locks were changed. We have a lot of programs that operate out of that on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. Then when I asked about getting a key, I was told that for me to get a permanent key, I would have to fill out their volunteer paperwork, and then I could become a point of contact for the county. I've given y'all a copy of this paperwork. I don't know if you have it. Number one, I'm not a volunteer for the county. I have no intentions of being a volunteer for the county. I don't mind giving you my information. I don't mind y'all running a background check on me. And I don't mind signing for a key that I have it, I will be responsible for it. But I have no intentions of signing this paperwork for the code of conduct and for the release of liability. It doesn't apply to me. There has to be another way of doing it. And I just want to say that, you know, I need a key to continue doing the work for the Blueberry Festival, for Bostwick Community Association. Thank you.
Okay,
Your
thank you, Ms. Linda.
consideration is appreciated.
Okay. Mike Knoll?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners. Mike Knoll, 164 West Harbor Drive. Yeah, my wife and I relocated here from Middleburg to Bostwick about 7 years ago. We pretty quickly became active in the fire department out there, the volunteer fire department, as well as the Bostwick Community Association. I currently serve as the president of the Community Association. And again, we do appreciate your time. You've heard a lot of what I was going to cover, so I'm just going to real quickly touch on the what the Community Association does for the community, what we do out of that community center that y'all have provided us. The political forums, y'all have all been invited to those each year when election time comes around. We run a trunk or treat at Halloween time. We run a Christmas parade out of there for the local Bostwick area. We do a back to school bash with hot dogs, ice cream for the kids, you know, funds and games. We give out school supplies each year. We've done that for the last 3 years. The Blueberry Festival, you've heard about that. That's our big event. The scholarships that Mr. Bill mentioned. You know, we run a pretty good organization out there. We run a good event. The last 2 years, we've not been able to hold the festival due to COVID. However, we have continued to hand out scholarships to local students to the tune of $10,000 over the last 2 years without being able to hold that event to raise funds. Other community groups that we give to every year, we were not able to make these donations last year due to funds. We give funds to the local volunteer fire department, the 4-H club, the Boy Scouts when they were around. We give donations annually, the Safe Pet Rescue, Friends of the Library, the Police Athletic League, the 1024 Foundation, which supports Putnam County Sheriff's, you know, families that are in need of financial equipment, et cetera. The Fire Explorers Program when they're active, the Putnam County Sheriff's Auxiliary, the Putnam County Sheriff's Explorers, the Putnam First Cancer Fund. So we hold this event, we do these things to support the community and give back and help support the operations of Putnam County with these auxiliary groups. So again, what we're looking for is just a commitment that the staff will hopefully work to reestablish the relationship that we've had in the past. You know, you have county employees out there that don't have keys that need them. The librarian used to have a key to let in the bug man. As I understand, when he got there last year to spray, or last month to spray the facility, he had no way to get in because the librarian, who's a county employee, doesn't have a key. Our fire chief, he's on the payroll. He's born and raised here, been the fire chief out there for 15 years. You know, he lives across the street. When the sheriff and his folks get called out 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, doesn't matter. If they need to get into a building because they got an alarm going off, they knock on his door because he usually has a key. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I'm on the county's payroll as well as a volunteer. So you already have folks out there that you could facilitate having keys to county employees if that's the way it needs to go. But again, we just want to be able to get and operate the charity that we're doing. And the last thing is we have 2 separate rooms out there. One's an office where we store sound equipment and a lot of other stuff that belongs to us. We have a room in the back that has a lot of equipment that we use for the festival itself. Those used to be separately keyed, now they're keyed alike. So anyone that gets in there and rents the facility has access to all of our equipment and stuff that we use to put on the festival. So we would ask at the very least that those be keyed separately as well as they used to be. And one final thing I meant to do first, The bathroom locks, I don't know if it's a new item or not, but something to check out. I don't know if it is a code violation or not, but certainly a public safety violation. Those bathrooms that are gang bathrooms, 3 or 4 stalls, can be locked from the inside. So you get a pedophile out there, brings a kid in there, locks the door from the inside, we've got an issue. So please check that out right away. Thank you all very much. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, I just want to make a comment. I appreciate everything that was said here today. And everyone on this board, I'm sure, has been in a civic organization or volunteered such as y'all. I've been a Rotarian for 34 years, and for 30 of those years, 33 we put on the Catfish Festival, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And that is one thing that makes Putnam County special, okay, is the people who give, and just not monetarily, but give with their efforts, with their talents and abilities to make Putnam County a better community, county to live in. I think we've got 2 issues. I think we have 3. We got a misunderstanding, I think. We've got some issues with the facility, and I'm going to take care of that. I'm chairman of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, okay? So, Ms. Linda, I know you have my contact information. Joel, you probably do too. But I'll get with Julianne, we'll get with staff, and we will work on these, okay? I believe the next problem is the keys. So I guess we need to probably have a discussion of that. The county has a policy, and it's just not for Parks and Recs. It's for if you want to be a volunteer with any part of the county, whether it's the EOC, Animal Services, Parks and Recs, or whatever. So if we can have this discussion, Commissioner Rawls, we're open up to you. That is up in your district. But I'll take care of these items that with the building. I'll take care of that.
Thank you, I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Who's the contact person there? I'm sure Kevin will know. Is it Miss Linda? Okay. All right. I'll get these addressed at some point in the near future.
You know, to me, it seems like we have an opportunity here to have a joint participation agreement where we can work with an established nonprofit and have a memorandum of understanding, and work out some kind of agreement where things can go back to the way they were. You know, this isn't a situation like we had with Melrose where you have 2 factions fighting over one piece of property. This is a situation where you have this continuous use group. And, you know, I attended the meeting last night, but I've attended numerous meetings. If you'd been there last night, I'm guessing there was probably 40 people in there at one time when they had the young folks come up and they crowned the prince and princess and king and queen of the Blueberry Festival coming up.
Blueberry?
Yep. They have princes and princes now too. But you know, in all honesty, it seems mindless to me that there's a very simple solution, and that's where we let the public do what the public does best, and we get out of their way. It pains me to hear, and I'll tell you right now, we are not putting our thumb on anybody. This commissioner is absolutely not in favor of government standing in anybody's way. I want as little government as possible. You guys have done a terrific job. It speaks for itself. They have pride in their area out there, and they really do ask for very little, at least when it comes to this. When it comes to road, that's a whole different conversation. But I think that we should work towards getting an MOU with the corporation as soon as possible. Let them have, have an established set of procedures for what we used to call in the military key binding, and know who has access to the keys. There's lots of different ways of doing it, least of all digital keys. But I think we really need to seriously think about doing that. I do have a lot of concerns about what Linda gave us. If I applied these to our staff, senior all the way to the bottom, nobody would work for this county. And some of this stuff is really offensive, but the one that really jumps off the page at me, it says that as a volunteer, if I do not know the answer to a question, I will find someone that does, and I will not assume to know what to say. I understand the importance of answering questions correctly, as well as the damage that can be caused by providing erroneous information. Really? If that was applied to people that work here, we would be firing people left and right. So I'm done.
Commissioner Amzak?
It seems trivial to me. I don't know. I just listening to it. I mean, obviously the stuff that needs to be worked on, but the keys to a community group, I mean, there's got to be some way they can log them out and keep them with that group. I mean, they live out there, and why? And I would assume that, especially in that location, where the fire station's right there on the same lot practically, that they would have a key as well. I mean, that just the idea that this is a conversation is surprising to me, I guess, to be honest with you.
Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too experienced a lockout in Larkin. I had a client come meet me, and we were going to talk broadband for the county, and my key didn't work, the building. But we have a different scenario out in Larkin at the community center. We do have some volunteers who actually man the community center during the day, most all days except Friday. Our Rotary Club just moved to that. So we did fill out that form, and I do have a new key, and our president just filled out that form. But I think we can come to a mutual understanding here. But keys, I mean, we all agree, keys are a problem. And if we can find a way to lock that down a little bit. Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate your looking into these, but they have a Blueberry Festival coming up here in 2 weeks, so that storage locker and some issues need to be jumped on pretty quick. But I think we can come to an understanding of that. But what we do out in Larkin, I'm not going to say it works well, but it has worked well since we got the community center, is we have a lady who pretty much oversees it out there. And she gets volunteers to come in during the day. They take shifts, and we use it at that point. So, but our Rotary Club gets there before she gets up in the morning. We're an early Rotary Club at 7:30. And so we filled out the form, got a key, and moved forward. Our president did. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Turner?
Okay, so it sounded to me like we ended up having key problems, and we changed keys on all the county facilities because we just didn't have any idea who had a key anywhere on any building we had. So you got to appreciate that's going to be an issue. I mean, you got to appreciate it. You can't just open your building to anybody that wants to go in there.
Absolutely understood.
We've got to have some kind of a semblance of control over not just your building, but also the other buildings and what have you. You can't just, or otherwise, why don't you just go take the locks off doors, just let everybody in that wants to walk in?
Sure, absolutely.
That's a ridiculous statement, and I apologize to you for that, but that's where we're headed here. So I think this can be worked out with you guys. I don't think there's been an issue in the past with you guys that I'm aware of, and so I'm sure that this can be worked out. And so, Mr. Chairman, how would you like to handle this? Would you like them to just get with Kevin and try to work something out, get with Miss Julianne and try to work something out? You as chairman of Parks and Rec, how would you like to handle this? I mean, I don't think this is an obstacle that can't be worked out fairly easy.
All right, but this is a policy of the whole county, not just Parks and Rec. This building is taken care of by Parks and Rec. So it's a little different. If we're going to modify for just Parks and Rec, then we would have to modify just Parks and Rec facilities, which would not only be, community centers, it would be ball fields. It would be a lot of different things.
Yes, sir, you're correct. So what you've got there is a volunteer form that we use countywide, regardless of what you want to do. And I realize that the term volunteer is loose. This particular situation, just to bring a little bit of light to it, we have made multiple attempts to find reconciliation and common ground to the extent that we do have about 4 members in the Bostwick community who have a key on an interim basis, who have not turned in their information, so that we can move forward to find reconciliation. What is important is that we mitigate the liability to the county of those key holders for damage to persons or properties and/or any injury that may be sustained or adverse PR by activities that they may promote or engage in that building under the county's osmos of a county community center. So whether or not we go some sort of standalone MOU or whether or not we go through the typical already established volunteer packet, which essentially is only establishing that you are not a known liability to the county to do damage to persons or property. Those community centers do attract our most vulnerable populations, both old and young, and that is important to us to mitigate that liability. Now, with that said, whether or not you go an MOU, which includes the same protection to the county, or you keep everybody on the same volunteer, as we have with Georgetown and Interlochen and all the other community centers that are under our authority, that's completely at the board's direction and however you want to handle it. But as you said, key control is important, and it had gotten very, very out of compliance, and that is part of why those key holders didn't get notified, because we had a list of compliant key holders and we reached out to them, and obviously we didn't have an updated or good list, because through the years, and it's been a long time since we've done this, keys get handed to my friend who's going to open it for me tonight, and then another key gets handed and another key, and that's what we ended up with. So there's a lot of caveats to that. I did meet with Ms. Bazar personally last week, and I thought we had found resolution. Maybe we still have found resolution. I haven't gotten an update from her. But again, either way, we can find something standalone that limits the county's liability, or we can continue down the same volunteer packet with the applicable parts to it.
Okay, I don't think anybody had been denied a key. It's just the fact of filling out an application, is that correct?
It's
Just
the
an
application, and, you know, most of us still do work, so it's hard to get here between the hours of whatever the hours are, 7 to 4, 7 to 5. You know, I had to take off work this afternoon to come here. So, you know, that's a lot of the hassle, is having to come, you know, take off work.
We agreed to
come
meet
get
him
the
out
key.
there as well. It may not have gotten extended to you, but as I told Ms. Bazar, I can meet her out there if that makes it easier on your group. Whatever it is that, you know, all of those things, we are certainly willing to make a way or a path for you guys to achieve your finish line.
Okay, Commissioner Adamczak?
I guess while we're figuring this out, do we have a way to get them a couple keys?
They have them.
So they have them 24/7 until the Blueberry Festival, and we'll figure the rest of this out. Is that?
On an interim basis, yes. Technically, they're not supposed to have them, but Ms. Bazar has one.
I'm gonna,
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll get with Kevin. But yes, there are keys that are out in that community already on an interim basis. And we'll write down who's, of this group.
okay, wait a minute.
I wasn't aware that there were any keys out. I guess what I'm hearing is maybe we have one key. I'll have to follow up.
So I guess I'm saying until we figure this out, can we give them
Yep.
a couple keys and make sure the fire hall has a key? I mean, it's,
If the board directs somebody to sign off on those keys and takes the liability, we will give out as many keys on an interim basis as the board likes.
How many keys do you feel you need till we get this figured
I would
out?
say we can get by with 2 until the festival. We're there pretty much every day from now to the end of the month.
and I guess the other part is a separate key for that locker or office. Is there a way to change that so it's on its own?
If the board would like a group to have a dedicated room, then yes, we can add that. We don't extend that at any other facility, but if you would like it, I'm happy to do whatever the board would direct.
Okay, wait. Come up here, I want you to make your comments. Chief, are you going to come up here? No, I'll get to you later. Y'all have to understand that we have to have some type of accountability, okay? Not that y'all aren't accountable, okay? There's no question about that. But the vandalism that we have in some of our facilities is absolutely ridiculous. We're having it in Crescent City, you know. So the thing about it is I wish we could just leave the doors open like Commissioner Turner said, but we can't. So we have to have some accountability. And it has nothing to do with the past. It has to do with the world we're living in, okay, unfortunately. Okay, so Chief, you wanted to make a comment.
I do understand that. I'll bring up a topic for the fire station. He's well aware. The county's well aware. I've been trying to get keys for my firefighters so we don't even lock the building. And we're good with that because we've got good security. As far as the festival goes, this, I think, all happened by mistake because Miss Linda's there the festival time, and Miss Betsy's there on Wednesdays. Mr. Charlie's there on Fridays playing music. So there's really only 4 keys that were out there. I have a key now, but the only reason I have a key is because I went and signed it out. I'm right next door a whole lot. If I'm not next door, I'm at a fire or at my house doing my duties. But, and there's someone always at that station. It's really well in a nice area. My understanding from Public Works, the locks were changed because they found the door unlocked. My question was anything stolen? No. So it was sort of like done under the table. Nobody was warned. Sort of makes, after 20-something years, 25 years that we've been doing this festival, that we're not appreciated, that we were sort of stepped on. And I guess that's all I can really say.
I'm sure might have felt that way, but sure that's not the case at all. Okay, Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you. I failed to say that the insurance proceeds came from my insurance agency. I had the contractor insured that burnt the place down, so we did pay the claim. So, yeah, it wasn't funny back then because it really hurt my loss ratio, but companies almost pulled out of my agency based on that. But that's neither here nor there. In Interlaken, I have an office out there. Mr. Adamczak and I can use that office. So there's a key out there. We have a key for that. I don't know if you have one, Mr. Adamczak, but you can get one. We could get Commissioner Rawls, a key for a separate lock. I don't see that as a problem at all. And then if Commissioner Rawls needs more keys, we could easily handle that. And he could be responsible for it. So I think we can get around that. I don't think anybody intentionally tried to do anything. Like I said, I got locked out, and they just didn't know I had a key. But I do have a key, so, for Interlaken. I don't have it for any other building, but I do have one for here. Thank you.
Mr. Rawls?
I think we need to go back and revisit the application. I think for these type of scenarios, it needs to be different. It says you can't wear shorts, open-toe shoes. I'm a shorts and flip-flop guy on the weekends if I don't have anything going on. I would hate to be denied access to a public building because I'm wearing shorts and flip-flops. So I think we need to go back and revisit that as well. But I think an MOU in this case is warranted. I think it would solve the problem instantly. I don't think it requires a whole lot of deliberation. But every small niche area of Putnam County is different and special in their own way. And Bostwick, if you guys could come out there and see what they do, they really do a lot for the community. And I'm not saying this tongue in cheek. These guys put on trunk or treat. They do something at Christmas time. They have their parade. They have the Blueberry Festival. They have their 4-H. They have their own 4-H club. We do.
Huh? Interlaken does too.
Right, but I'm just saying but I think Bostwick is that sleepy little community that nobody really they stick do things their own and they do a great job of it. So I think in this case, if, the sooner we can get to an MOU with them, the better off everybody will be. And then it'll also take some of the burden off of us as the government too, because now we have a partner in the building that will be looking at it on a regular basis and not having to, I would imagine it's something that we could work out where they can help out with maybe some of the lighter maintenance issues or items. But, having a toilet that's running for a month before somebody discovers it or more, who knows? That's a non-starter. Thank you.
Commissioner Turner?
Yeah, we could talk about this for 3 more days, and everybody loves Boston, so don't misunderstand these comments. Let's just figure out a way to fix this, or what is the hell? We spent 45 minutes talking about who can have a key. I'll pay to make a key to give to the lady right there that's had a key for the last 35 years. So, I understand we got to have rules, guys. I understand, and somebody's got to be accountable. But I'll give her a key to my house, and I just met her this afternoon, and I'm that good a judge of character, I believe. So I'm just saying, I understand we got to have rules, and I'm certainly not trying to get on anybody, and please excuse me for being facetious, because I don't mean to be, but we need to fix things like this as they come along. We can get somebody to sign an agreement to hold harmless the county with her key. I'd sign that agreement. I doubt you'd have a problem either, but I'm not gonna fill out a form that takes me 2.5 days, or I have to hire a secretary to do it. So, really, can't we work something out here? I mean, do you need direction from the board? Do you want me to make a motion that we give this young lady right here? Did you like that young lady? Okay. Did we give this young lady here a key to the building, and if she'll sign a waiver that says she'll be responsible for that key? Can we do that?
The board can do anything they'd like.
I understand, Julie, I'm not trying to be that way. I'm asking, will that set a precedence on all the other community
Yes, it will.
centers?
I think it
Okay.
will.
So then what do we do we've got to do something to solve this issue. It seems silly, but it's really not silly. So,
Agreed. And that's why we have tried to meet with them. That's why we can try to come up with an MOU as suggested by them in this meeting. If that's something that they would like to entertain versus the volunteer application. Because we essentially come up with MOUs for, we don't call them that, but essentially that's what our athletic programs run off of as well. So absolutely, that's a viable option. We can get with legal counsel and develop that MOU that would have the protection that we require as a county. And if other community volunteer groups wanted to have the same MOU to govern their community center, it could apply to that as well.
Okay, can we work on this particular one if you
Yes.
get Rich to look at this?
Yes.
And then I'll be back up Monday.
Sure.
We'll have a pre-agenda meeting, and then could a
Absolutely.
representative from Ms. Linda or somebody, a representative from Bostwick, come Monday morning, and we could probably take care of that then?
If, assuming that Rich can get it back to us,
If
yes.
the board approves that we work out
I'm
a
good with
MOU.
that.
Fine, yeah.
What I don't want to do is, Mr. Chairman, if I may, is that we don't hold up the volunteers from from the Blueberry Festival
Right.
to be able to go put on the Blueberry Festival.
Right,
So if
exactly.
we need to get keys to somebody, then get them to sign just a statement that says, I assume liability for this key until this is worked out, because I feel like Parks and Rec Committee is gonna work this out on Monday.
And Mike is the president of the
Just wanna slow them
association.
down or stop them from doing what they're doing.
Mike is the president of the association. He might be the perfect person to be responsible for that.
Well, and it may be that
To get over the
him
hump,
and
I'm
one or
saying.
two others needs to get a key. If the
Yep.
chief has a key now, I mean, I trust the chief. Anybody in here doesn't,
Right.
they're not a very good judge of character. And so, he's got a key, so we'll give it the chief.
We have those.
got it.
Make sure the chief has a key, make sure, from now for the next couple of 3 weeks, we just need to make sure that we don't interrupt the presentation of this Blueberry Festival. If they need a key, we need to get one to somebody somehow.
Okay, all right, Douglas? I want to hear your comment.
Monday morning, do you want us to come back, sir?
Well, hang on.
We'll leave Julianne your contact information, and we'll get back with you before the end of the week.
Thank you
Okay?
all for your time. Sorry to waste your time.
Okay.
Tell him this is his 3 minutes, not 2 or 3 more times.
Douglas Hayes, 216 Huron Avenue, Satsuma. I'm sorry to jump in on this conversation, but in a socialist government, the larger entity owns the community centers. That's the Bostwick Community Center. You have the Bostwick Association. Why don't you just sell that building to the association for $1? Let them maintain it.
They don't want it.
Hey,
They're booing you behind your back, so.
Yeah, they don't want it.
Well, that alleviates, let them run their own business.
Well,
I understand
They
that.
can maintain it, they can do fundraisers for repair, the folks next door, they can mow their own grass.
Mr. Chairman, in the
Alleviates the
meantime-
tax
All right,
burden on
thank you,
the rest
Douglas.
of us.
Thank you for that idea, but and I'm still gonna give you 3 minutes at the end of the meeting, okay?
Oh, yeah,
On communications, but not yet.
I'm gonna try to get 6, I got 2 topics.
Okay. You're gonna get 3.
You're gonna get 3.
You're gonna get 3. All right, Joel, one more comment.
Say one thing, we do not want what he just said. We appreciate it. All we want is what we have.
Right.
We know, Joel.
Those 2 rooms.
We're trying to get you there, Joel.
We're-
We're trying to get you there.
We're gonna get you there, no question about that, okay?
So me filling that out, can I have a key, can she get me those 2 doors changed, and
He's gonna work that out.
I'll be responsible for that building. How's that? If any damages, or, you know, I don't wanna rent it out or nothing, but if she rents it out, they need to let us know when it's, you know, gonna be rented.
Do you,
There's no communication, that's what I see.
Okay,
gonna have to
we're,
come to
we're,
the
we're gonna,
microphone.
we'll work that out. Okay, but you're gonna get him a key. He has a key, okay. All right, Commissioner Harvey?
Mr. Chairman, to bring this in for a landing, I really do believe we have a commissioner out there, assign him 3 or 4 keys. He can keep track of who's got them, and then MOU can be done very, very fast. He's an elected official. He
please
can
take
easily
this
handle
in the right manner. If we want a key and we're gonna keep that key, I have no issue. But if we start handing that key out and then that person goes and makes a copy of that key, then we're back in the same position.
Right.
So.
I hear you.
Well, I think that this is.
it. Can't make a copy of it.
Right, this needs to be an issue, if possible, that we work out a valid way to make this, and we don't set a precedence. We give them what they need and what they want, but we don't set a precedence that we just give a key to anybody that wants one all over the county, to any county building.
I would suggest that, since you guys want to have your own lock or your own key, maybe you all supply the locks. Joel, if you'll get with me, I'll give you access to my account in Jacksonville, and you guys can get the locks.
We got to get in it too, though.
Yeah, we gotta get into it too. So
Well, we
we'll-
can give the county a key, right? Yeah. But they pay for the locks, not the citizens having to pay to rekey them again. They can do it themselves and give, yep. they
I
pay.
think we're just making
No,
things
just for
worse.
the,
Yeah, I think we're-
just
I
for
think
the,
we're making-
just for the
we're-
2 storage rooms.
We're gonna discuss it.
Not for the building,
We're
just
gonna
for the 2
discuss
storage
it.
rooms.
She's gonna talk to the attorney, we'll discuss it hopefully on a Monday, and thank you very much for everything that y'all do. But I wanna commend Julianne and her staff. We had to start doing something. Now, did it come across the best way? Evidently not, but we're having this discussion and we're gonna get it taken care of, okay? All right, thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, before we leave, I'm an upstanding person too. I let Linda put her purse in my truck, and everything was still intact when you got it back, correct? Thank you. There you go. I was gonna put a little extra in it, but I didn't have much on me, so.
And I don't want
Thank you.
I don't want a key. I got enough keys in the south end, so, okay, thank you. All right, we'll move down to, Commissioner request, Jeff, on Waste Pro yard discussion.
Yeah, I talked to Jay. We had an issue down on Westover Drive where a citizen had a concern that his neighbor had put a bunch of debris out. It was too large for Waste Pro to deal with. Waste Pro put a card on the pile, and oddly enough, it rained that day. So the guy comes back and he sees that the card's there, and he's still kind of upset because the pile's not disappearing. It's been there for a long period of time. So when I talked to Daniel Carl, Daniel says, well, our contract says we don't have to pick that up. But what I want to talk about is we can't just leave the debris and the litter sitting piled up on the side of the road. So I don't know what we can do to direct staff to be able to get that taken care of, or give them the autonomy to be able to give a directive to Waste Pro to pick it up, and then we charge that back to the landowner. But this afternoon, this morning, we were discussing cleaning up Putnam County by making people be responsible for their property. This, I think, goes part and parcel to that.
Okay, Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, Waste Pro does try to take little bites of the apple. They just can't take the whole thing at one time. It might fill up a whole truck. And then, if I'm not mistaken again, Waste Pro contacts the people about a cost of cleaning the whole thing up and billing them. Because we're having the same problem, and all over the county. It's not just, it's everywhere. So could you allude to that? If that's
Sure. So if the load is, or if the pile does not meet their specs and it's commingled, they're not going to mess with it. They're going to leave a ticket that is going to instruct the people, if you will separate the limbs that are acceptable out from those that are not acceptable, we'll pick up the other pile, but then it's on you to get rid of the ones that are not acceptable per our contract. That's their communication method. And then the way it works is that per their contract, they can come up with a rate they can charge that citizen to come back and pick the oversized stuff or the non-spec stuff with their grapple truck or whatever it is, but that is strictly between them and the citizen. We don't get involved with that at all.
Right, thank you.
But the problem goes to when it sits there.
And I don't think,
Hang on just a second. And I'll make a comment before we go to, I think Commissioner Adamsack is next, and we'll get to everybody. Is, in my conversations with, Daniel, is that, it may take them a couple of trips.
Right.
To get it, and they've actually, I had a conversation with him about, it was a group of houses that were putting stuff in one pile. He said, just tell them to lay off just a little bit and let me get it down to a certain level. So Daniel will work with you really, really well, but he does have his guidelines he's got to go to. So I think it was Commissioner Rawls, or Commissioner Adamsack, sorry.
Yeah, so, I mean, we just had this call out in my area too, and that pile's out of spec, and there wasn't anything offered from Waste Pro to go pick it up out of spec, so, now, that person's attitude wasn't necessarily he wasn't the sweetest person in the world to any of us, but, as of today, that pile still sits there. I drove by it this morning, so, pile's too big, it has a mix of different types of things in it. I think it's the guy's responsibility to take care of his pile personally. But how do we communicate that to him? And I've tried, you've tried in that case, Daniel's tried, and
And in that case as well, and I've got some handouts that I brought today to give each and every one of you on the exempt list of things that can't be picked up. If it's normal yard maintenance and they have a landscaping contractor as the one that puts out there, they're not supposed to pick it up. It's strictly what the citizen themselves puts out there is what their contract says.
Commissioner Turner?
guys, this is not an isolated incident. Every commissioner has this, I can give you 5 spots in my district, 5 spots at least, and maybe more. And we'll probably find 2 more driving to them 5 spots to look at them. It's not an isolated incident. You got to draw the line somewhere, or people are gonna start clearing their lot and setting it out by the street and wanting the county to go pick up all the trash and haul it off. And it's not far from that in a lot of instances. So if it fits within the guidelines, Waste Pro will peck at it and pick it up over a period of time if it falls within the guidelines. If it doesn't fall within the guidelines, then the owner is responsible to get it to the landfill. They can hire somebody privately. They can call Waste Pro and say, how much do you want to do this? Just like when they threw all them mattresses out at the hotel and we had a bass tournament coming to town, I think the Chamber of Commerce actually paid out of their pocket several years ago to pay Waste Pro to pick up them mattresses, because they didn't want 40 mattresses sitting on the side of the highway with a bunch of out-of-town people coming in to look at our community. So it's no different here. We got to draw the line somewhere. I think we got a good policy in place where it is right now. And if we can't get somebody to move their trash, then I think code enforcement needs to go pay them a visit. Yeah. It's no different than if they throw a couch on the side of the road. Find out who does it. That's a code enforcement issue. Go deal with them. So, you know, I understand, but like I said, this is way from isolated to just that one on there. I'm not exaggerating. There's 5 of them on the north side. So, and it's the exact same situation. Big giant tree limb falls down, and instead of them hauling it off, they just go set it upside the road and start calling. Y'all need to get that offside the road. Doesn't matter there was 4 other pallets and a bunch of other junk in there. No, that doesn't matter to them. They want you to pick it up. Well, I'm sorry. We don't pick up personal trash outside of the guidelines. Just don't do it.
And the other thing is they don't pick up anything that's over a 6-yard load, because that's the size of their hopper. Yeah. Their contracts, I believe, specifically says it can't be one piece over 6 yards. So it's you know, ultimately it is up to the homeowner, you know, to get it done. I guess the one thing that I could talk to Waste Pro about, because I was talking with Daniel about it this morning, is just make sure that they offer, if it's an out of spec load, that they offer, you know, that they can come pick it up, but it's going to be an additional charge to the homeowner. And I believe a minimum charge is $100. It starts at $100 for them to come out there and pick it up with that piece of equipment.
So what I'm proposing is this. instead of burdening the code enforcement folks with more work, if we have this type of situation, we send a demand letter to the homeowner, tell them they have blank days to comply. Otherwise, we send waste pro out there, we pay the $100 or whatever it is, it gets cleaned up, and then we tack that on as a fine to their home and notify them that they have been fined.
Well, who would do that
Other than
Who-
codes
Who would do that other than codes?
they'd have to
Well,
do it.
at that point they could, but we wouldn't be opening a code case against them. We would just go in there. Otherwise, the code cases take so long and the pile just sits there and sits there and sits there. I'm saying something that's more reactionary that we can get it cleaned up, and
Well,
I'm not trying to punish the people, but
Please, please understand, I'm not trying to debate you on this, but don't you think that both sides of this deserves due process?
I think if the minute that they build a house and they agree to be a citizen of Putnam County,
They lose due
they,
process.
no, they know due process. So but when we send them that letter, we're giving them the opportunity to take a corrective action. If they decide to do nothing about it, then we have to step in.
Okay.
Now, if the letter comes back undeliverable, then we might have a different conversation, but there's got to be a way to do it besides let it sit around for 6 or 8 months or longer, and then the wind blows and it gets blown all over the place, and,
What would that timeline be, Commissioner, after the time it's first noticed to the time we send the letter?
I'd say give them five days to respond.
Like, how long would you let that sit out there before it becomes a burden enough that we need to send the letter to them?
When somebody notices there's a pile that's out of
Yes, sir.
compliance, I
Yes,
think the
sir.
notice should go out immediately,
Okay,
because they may be ignorant to what compliance is.
okay.
I had one guy that fought and argued with me. Daniel went out there and looked at it, took pictures, sent it back to me, and he had that commingled pile you're talking about. And I said, sir, if you would go take the pile apart, they will pick it up. But he didn't know. He was just complaining, they're not picking my stuff up. They drive out and they leave. So it's gonna take some practice. I think we'll get it right.
Commissioner
Y'all
Adams?
want this information from their contract that kind of goes over this, or y'all
Yeah,
good?
I'd like it.
Sir?
Do you have the pamphlets? Is that
Yes,
what you got?
no, what I got is I pulled out of the contract the specific information that actually shows you what is exempt and what can't be put out on the curbside, and then all the rules for the yard waste.
Daniel went over it, and I told Daniel, I said at some point, maybe we have to renegotiate their contract next time and include more, or have something that, protects us. The city of Plaquemine they used to have a clamshell, I'm assuming they still do, they run around once a week. And that keeps that cleaned up, but, we are trying to get ourselves to be more presentable to the rest of the world, and I think this is just part of it.
Commissioner Adams, you had your light on.
So I guess I don't really care which way we do it, whether it's the way Commissioner Turner said with code enforcement or this other thing, but who's the trigger? Waste Pro is the one.
I don't need one, Jay.
Waste Pro is the one that's on the road, but you're gonna have Waste Pro call code enforcement? That seems counterintuitive.
It's not how it happens now.
Right. So, but that's what I'm saying. Either way, if we went code enforcement or this other process, what triggers that process? That's the part that would be confusing to me. The homeowner ain't gonna call up and go, hey, let me trigger this on myself. So does that, if Daniel sees something that's out of spec, would he call you?
We'd better have to put it on, that's about the only, because they're our eyes and ears. I mean, we're not riding around every street.
Well, we're fixing to open up a can of worms the size of Kansas. Because the problem is that if I take my yard trash that's non-compliant and I go set it in front of Jay's house, then I deserve due process, and so does he. If we take this and short-circuit this whole process where somebody gets in trouble faster, then we've just made a problem, a big problem. We turned a small problem, which this is not just a really minute problem, but it's pretty small compared to what we deal with around here. Right. We just took that and we broke it off in somebody because we didn't give them due process. That's important through this process.
I agree with that, but how do we get to that due process point?
We got it
one of my
now.
questions. How do we get it?
Code
enforcement.
How does code enforcement get notified? They're not driving around looking at piles of trash.
Usually the
Oh.
piles that I usually have a problem with,
Call
citizens call me.
Yeah. citizens call me, I call Jay, and he gets hold of Daniel, they decide if it's an issue, and they call code enforcement.
We do, we reach out, we forward the ones that we can't come, so we try to come to some sort of understanding. And if it's just one that we, we can't get there and the people report, and then that's when we refer it to codes enforcement.
I've only been called on 3 of these, and it's a minor problem, like you're saying, but all of them came from the person that made the pile. So all 3 of the ones I dealt with, it wasn't a neighbor complaining about the neighbor. It was, I piled this stuff up on, why ain't they picking up? I've called 40 times the last 4 months, and they ain't come get it. And then Daniel's like, it's out of spec. You verify it's out of spec, and
Go haul it to
two
the dump.
of them, the people did that.
Yeah.
The one that doesn't, that's what I'm asking. Where does that? Who triggers to code enforcement?
If they're gonna refuse to do it, then we'll make the call from my department. That's what we do now.
That's all I was asking.
Okay.
I agree. I think people need due process.
All right, Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to be very, very careful here. We have, 33,000 assessments? 34,000 assessments. Even if we all have 5 we're talking 25, double that, maybe 50 that we don't know about. But we do have a lot of compliance out there now, and people are doing the right thing. It's just there's a handful of folks that just aren't doing the right thing. And I think we just need to focus in on that. I don't think we need to get your phrase, there's not enough juice for the squeeze on that one, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to open up the contract again. I don't want to pay for your mismanagement of your pile when I manage my pile, and I don't think that's fair. So, thank you.
Commissioner Rawls?
Good.
At the end of the day, what we're talking about is our curb appeal. And if we have to wait until a citizen complains, we're not doing our job. They're doing our job. We have a lot of people that we have on payroll, people that drive around, people that don't drive around. We have a contractor that picks up trash. They see the front of almost every house that we have in the county, at least once a week. I think whatever we have been doing may not be efficient, may not be effective. I think it's time that we start looking at a different way of approaching this. I'm not trying to take anybody's due process, but at the same time, if you're more concerned about the person that's dumping on their neighbor, then their neighbor gets no consideration. Where's their due process? So I'm not trying to make a cyclical argument or conversation. I think that we need to reevaluate how we do business to clean our county up, make ourselves look more attractive, get our curb appeal up where it needs to be, and then start educating the public on what they can and cannot do. That's all. Maybe it happens at budget time when we look at what we're doing. Maybe we put another clamshell on the road and we run a clamshell ourselves. I don't know what the answer is. I just wanted to have a conversation about this. And
Thought that what we were doing.
Yep. All right, Commissioner Adamczak?
I appreciate the conversation, and I think exactly what you described is how it has to happen. It has to come to you, it has to go to code enforcement in those few extreme cases where there's refusal for compliance. And I mean, if we're gonna get people out on the road looking for these situations, I want them looking for blighted houses that are vacant way before they're looking for a pile of trash on the side of the road. I apologize, but that's a fact, and we're not doing that yet. And that's because the economy's at scale, we don't have the money to do that yet. But at some point, I hope we get there. And but that would be way prioritized over these few piles that we're getting complaints about.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Yep, moving on. Commissioner comments. Commissioner Rawls, we'll stay with you. Have any further closing comments?
Just have one more. I got a complaint from a resident at Port Buena Vista, and I got with Mr. Troxel and got a response on what's going on, but what I got was concerning to me as a commissioner, because the way she framed the email was that the water test came back negative, that there was certain chemicals that were in the water that are hazardous to human health. They exceeded the EPA standard. In one case, if I remember correctly, it was by 100%. In other cases, by like 25 to 50% in excess of what's recommended or what's allowable. Mike sent me a response, an email. I think that we really should take a hard look at setting this as an emergency item before we open up a can of worms that we really aren't going to be able to afford. It's from what he's saying, it's around $300,000. You know, we set aside $3.5 million of ARPA money for the sewer system. Maybe we can take part of that money right now and get this stuff addressed ASAP. Or maybe look at it making a permanent repair and not just an emergency repair that's a Band-Aid on a festering wound, because this has been going on apparently for some years. It's not a new issue, but I've not seen what I saw this week in that email from her ever. Nobody's ever said, oh, by the way, we have a problem with this water plant and the people are drinking this water. You know, what I thought was Erin Brockovich is going to be moving to Putnam County for her next stint, and I just don't want to see that happen here.
Okay, I apologize. Was I supposed to bring that particular item up at all? No? Okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you. Commissioner Rawls, I did talk to Mr. Commando before he left today because I wanted to bring this up too, but he said we could not take action today. We'd have to wait until it was publicized. So there's nothing we can do today. And Mr. Troxel assured me it's going to be on the transportation workshop, so then we can take action on what we need to do. Thank you.
Okay, and that's in 2 weeks. Okay. All right, any other comments? Okay, Commissioner Harvey? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further comments.
Commissioner Adamsack?
I guess kind of in lines with what I'm going to ask if possible, if I can get on your next Parks and Rec board, and I'd like to send an email to, I guess, Julianne, the things that I would talk about since you and I are commissioners. But I've had several concerns that are kind of starting to overlap, some of which we've been able to address here and there and was fine, but now it's compounding with some of the parks in West Putnam and some of the locations that are owned by parks that people no longer have access to, or they feel they should have better access to, things like that. One of them was brought to my attention by myself. After someone brought it to my attention, I went out there and basically it's an area, I can't remember, Jewel Lake, is it, that has the interlocking boat launch for soft launch, right? Just situations where you're 100 yards from the water and you're going to bring a kayak down there, and I apologize, but I'm overweight and I had a very hard time getting my kayak down there and back, and I intended to bring my kids down there. I haven't been there in years since we first moved there, and then I've had asks from several people that do these fishing tournaments out there and stuff. They've abandoned half the lakes out there because they don't have the access. Like at that one in particular, if you have my van there with a little trailer for the kayak, no one else can park there if they wanted to. So you're gonna be parked all in front of all the neighborhood yards and stuff. And there's a good area that they used to be able to park in down there. And I get it. I talked to Kevin about it. Part of it is they don't want big boats launching there, but that same fence down there close to the water stops big boats from parking in there. Another one's Cowpen Lake, Church Lake, and the other lake where the same thing. You can park a few cars, but there's no reason that access to the water couldn't be moved closer to the water. I don't know why we've moved them back so far if we want to have access. And then the Johnson Park, I mean, just these I got to follow up with Kevin on. So
How many parks you got? You wouldn't let
Those-
me have one
actually,
in East Palaca.
Three
You
of
let-
them are in Harvey's area. Two of them are. So, and then the other one is in the Johnson Park, which is the one that is in my area. I think it's the only one. And I'm going to give it Kevin on this one because I haven't given Kevin the chance to talk to this one about. I'm just going to go talk to Kevin about getting some new basketball nets, and the volleyball net is basically destroyed. And I just want to bring up to the commission, I did talk to Mr. Troxel in front of there, so Parks and Rec doesn't have to drive all the way out there to mow it. The frontage on the road is owned by us, by the county. So he did feel like they possibly could just take, when they go with the big mower there, and just hit that swath by the fence, because the big mower's already there. Obviously we normally don't do it because it's off our right of way if it's private property, but in this case it's county property. And that just would make the whole look of that just a lot better, because right now it looks terrible. So these are some things I want to bring up at the Park and Rec thing.
Okay.
And I just want to make you aware of it, so you're not blindsided if I show up at a meeting. I didn't want to just come and be like, brr.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Harvey, you had a comment on the,
Just a real quick comment, Mr. Chairman. Years ago, way before me, but when I was landowner president, there was a bunch of those lake access lots out in Interlaken. And Kevin Dersher, Commissioner Dersher at the time, struck a deal with ILE and Lehigh Acres to basically, and we still have some money sitting in a fund, I think it's $58,000, But the intent was for people not to go down there and park. That was the intent. On some of the deeds out there, it gave them lake access. But people were partying, and believe me, I drove my truck into Violet Lake, filled it up with, where the lake the sheriff lives on, filled it up with beer bottles because people just went down there. And I believe one girl was assaulted down there. And when Kathy Jorgensen was a school board member, so to make a long story short, the county took them over, but the intent was for people not to go park. And Jewel Lake that you're talking about, people were trying to put boats in there, and they were jerking them out, and it was a bad, bad scene. So it turned into a soft launch. But their deeds required them to have lake access lots. They do have lake access. They just might not have the full, what they want to use out there, and I understand that. But there was a reason for that, and that's why the reason. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments, Commissioner Adams? Okay, Commissioner Turner?
I have nothing to add to all that, Mr. Chairman.
I don't. County Administrator?
No, sir, I think we're good. The only thing is the email that went out late yesterday. Commissioner Rawls sent us an email, I believe it was over the weekend, regarding Port Buena Vista. And so we did some research on it yesterday, Mr. Drossel, Mr. Willis, and myself. So I wanted everybody to have the same information, so when it did come up, everybody would be familiar with the process. So that's all I have today, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Okay.
What is the process? Are we, like, Mr. Drossel was bringing it on the transportation? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's gonna
But I
bring the
mean-
transportation meeting.
That was the first notification that I received as well.
Okay.
So when we received that notification, it was, it was imperative that we look at it, see what's the issue, how we can address and bring it back to the board for some resolution.
Accurate.
Exactly. Well, it's coming from, I believe, from DEP, but we just want to bring a solution back to the board at a future meeting so we can get this taken care of.
Okay, we'll open this up for public comment on miscellaneous items. This portion of the agenda is designed to allow citizens an opportunity to bring matters to the attention of the board. It's not reasonable to expect that the board will engage in debate or deliberation without prior notice. So, Douglas Hayes?
I'm Douglas Hayes, 216 Huron Avenue, Satsuma. Your public comment on the agenda item is before you guys discuss the agenda, and so I have comment on that now that I know what you've had to discuss, because I don't know what the agenda means, so that's why I was asking for a couple of minutes.
3 minutes.
And then, come on, man. And then my public general thing, I can maybe do in a minute and a half if I just don't get upset. There are options in regards to the communication system. Turns out that the school buses either are currently or we're using a company called Fleet Talk, which has a whole network of communications. And then turns out that there's I gave this information to Grimes, and I have a set to give to you guys. The other part is that there's a type of system called a trunk system, and then the new space age, the P25 communications. Don't mean to get technical, but anyway, it turns out that Florida Power and Light has a complete modernized system, and maybe we could piggyback on them to alleviate the cost of building our own network. So anyway, there are options before you go and spend $7-8 million for an unfunded liability. Now, in regards to what you spoke on the agenda, while you're working on the budget, why don't you get a contract with the volunteer fire departments? For some reason, I keep being told that you don't have contracts with them. That might help with some of the ideas. When it comes to paying the employees, that one reason a person works for government is because of the benefits package, so you might be able to tweak your benefits to offset, because even though they're getting $13 an hour, they're still having to contribute for some of their health care and benefits. So maybe there's a way that you could alleviate it so they get to keep more of their own money. I don't see you're wanting to add more emergency services and that kind of thing. I don't see a proactive approach for recruitment. Have yet to see any posters put up, and there is funding available via grants. She had mentioned a couple times that there is a department and a fund. I've been pounding this drum for a long time. You have animal services, you have a fund, but no transparency because the fund is actually, the money goes into the general fund. It's time to create a fund so that way there's transparency. And if we educate and enforce our dog licensing, there's a potential of about $250,000 to run that department. Retention of emergency services, if you ever take some of that grant money for ARPA and go towards premium pay for our emergency service people, and that instead of lights for the ballparks, might not be a bad idea. You're showing appreciation, might help with retention. In regards to IT and their server issue, it's a 50-50. If he has all his backups and has his primary servers, one way, sort of like an insurance plan, is to have a third-party cloud service. It is cost-effective because that way, if our stuff takes a dump due to natural disaster, you've got a cloud over in Ethiopia or wherever you get a grass hut in the Philippines. But bottom line, it's like insurance. It would cover your butt. In regards to the community center and repairs and upgrades, USDA has grants for community centers, and if they were a separate entity and not a product of the large Papa Bear County and allowed them to run their own business, it would be easier to get the grant, and we would not have to pay for the upgrades. Thank you very much. 5 minutes? Not bad.
You made it. Made it 4 minutes. Thank you, Douglas. Okay, any other public comment? Any other citizens wishing to make public comment? Okay. Any further business come before this board? We stand adjourned.